Monogatari series by Nisio Izan, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.a. Now, enjoy the story. We're already quite familiar with the name Shinobu Oshino. Hearing it doesn't make me particularly happy, but I don't find it odd either. It feels just right. The name she once had, Kissshot Acer Alorian Hard Underblade, must already be a thing of the past, even to her. The past, what came before, what's ended. Or perhaps, what never happened, what's uncertain if it ever happened. That's what it is to her, something spoken alongside her memories, or maybe even something with no relation to who she is now. Unrelated. I think it goes without saying that a past self is far more of a stranger than the average stranger, and is subject to a kind of hatred completely different from self-hatred. If you take me, for example, me, during spring break, me, during Golden Week. Me climbing the stairs, me on Mother's Day, me on my bike, and me in class are all someone else. Someone else. Strangers, people I don't know. This isn't an attempt to shift responsibility. I'm certainly not trying to disavow who I was back then. Either me back then did a very good job of things back then. I think I did everything I could with everything I had. But my everything was different from my everything. Now I think in each instance, based on each conviction, the person I am today would have behaved differently. Nevertheless, I'd have saved a vampire in the end. Nevertheless, I'd have been attacked by a cat in the end. Nevertheless, I'd have caught Senjogahara in the end taking those actions in each instance, based on each notion. Whether they are right or wrong, there are something like an infinite number of other paths I could have taken, and choosing from that infinitude is ultimately something decided in the moment. You could even say that it's up to whimsy. That Shinobu is the Shinobu she is now. That she's the Shinobu she is now and not a different one. That she's willing to throw away the name and form of a legendary vampire, the iron-blooded, hot-blooded, yet cold-blooded vampire Kissasat Acerolian Hard Underblade, and be the Shinobu she is now. This fact that is my greatest saving grace of all, could be called the product of her momentary whims. What joyous whims! Despite appearing like a little girl, she's far older than me, an 18-year-old kid, and has lived a long life that's gone on for more than 5 centuries, so maybe, rather unexpectedly, she can be considerate in these matters. No, not considerate, I know it's nothing more than caprice. So this time let's talk about how these whims of hers played out 400 years ago. About what she went through in this country 400 years ago. And what she did, that's our story. Shinobu Oshino. A story that goes back through her timeline. We'll rewind Shinobu's clock. That's not all we'll be doing, of course, because that past relates and doesn't relate to the present day. As always, I'll save, be saved, do things, be unable to. Please entertain your own thoughts on that as you read. I, Koyomi Araragi, am going to be thinking too. Previously in the series, I, Koyomi Araragi, traveled through time with my vampire partner, Shinobu Oshino, a dime a dozen experience during which we failed to change history and returned dejected to the modern day the end. If you wanted details, I'd ask you to consult Kabuki, the work before the work before the work before last, but you don't really need to. I'd ask you to do it, but I'm actually not. To be honest, I wish you wouldn't consult that tale of failure. Do you think I like showing off my faults or something? But I will go so far as to say that there was a moving reason behind our time travel, namely an attempt to revive Mayoi Hachikuji, my friend who died 11 years ago and has since been wandering this town. For the sake of my honor, I'd like to divulge stingily that I was trying to prevent her from ever losing her life in a traffic accident at the too young age of 10, though, when I asked her directly after coming back defeated and disappointed.
It's not as if I particularly want to revive. How pointless and self-serving, Mr. Araragi. Tee-hee.
That's what she said. She didn't actually go that far, so my grand midsummer adventure, on which I spent the last day of my last precious high school summer break, technically the day of the start of school ceremony for second term, was totally meaningless. As in, why bother wasting an entire book's worth of space on that? Are you stupid? Or what? Why don't you just die? Oh, being half vampire and immortal, you can't even do that? Hopeless bastard. So don't read Kabuki, okay? Promise me you won't. This isn't just an act. But anyway, I was plodding back home with this problematic ghost girl. Or really just the problem child known as Mayoi Hachikuji. Our start of school ceremony had already begun when I'd failed to change history via time travel and came back to the present. The exact time being an hour past noon on August 21st, a Monday. I was already feeling excited on the inside, as in look at what I've done absent on the very first day of the new term. Never having managed to start on my summer break homework in the end, Senjogahara and Hanakawa are gonna kill me 2 times each. I can't wait. Hooray. But all of that aside, I needed to return Hachikuzi's backpack to her. As far as the details regarding that one, they're not really worth discussing here, and to someone who'd just slipped into the past and future and whatnot in a pointless use of time, as Hachikuji put it. She didn't actually. It felt like old news, but, chronologically speaking, the ghost girl Mayoi had come to play in my room and forgotten her backpack there only yesterday, on August 20th. If you wanted details, what was it you could consult? The Onimonogatari Anime Complete Guidebook, if I'm not mistaken. There might be a short piece in there about that episode. But wait, that would mean it happened in the anime adaptation? So for us, does the event belong to a parallel world? Parallel world. A grading term. Well, in any case, I suppose that book isn't in distribution anymore. Gosh, the anime world is so rough. Just when it seemed to be a hit, it got weeded out in the blink of an eye. You could say such a quick turnover rate is in fact healthy for an industry. Actually, never mind. While I'd been hustling to alter the past, Hachikuji had been roaming the streets trying to retrieve her backpack from my house. If she was going to meander around for nearly half a day looking for me, then she could have just waited in front of my house around the time I usually got back from school, but when I put the question to her,
I don't want you searching my backpack. Searching it would be one thing, but the idea of you doing this and that to the fabric makes me want to vomit. What? You'd never. True, you might not, but the simple fact that you had the time is already inexcusable.
so went her reply. She didn't trust me at all. In fact, she plain hated me. Of course, a girl of such a young and tender age treating you like the plague might be a rare and welcome experience, so I wasn't at all opposed to partaking in it. But either way, Hachikuji still needed to reclaim her backpack. Hence, with her walking by my side, I was pushing my bicycle from Kita Shirayabe Shrine, the site of my time warp, and heading home. I do have to say, Hachikuji, you somehow feel weaker as a character without your backpack.
How rude of you, Mr. Araragi. These pigtails should be more than enough to establish who I am.
Pigtails, huh? They aren't up to defining you on their own, though. I heard good characters need to have designs that are identifiable just from their silhouette.
That's a very dated way of thinking. I believe it's been a long time since we've entered an age where templates like characters being identifiable by their silhouette and stories needing a traditional dramatic structure don't hold anymore.
I see you're as skeptical of pre-existing values as ever. There is.
What I think determines a character design's quality isn't the silhouette, it's whether they're recognizable even if someone with no artistic talent draws them. Like Goku or Pikachu. A child could draw them and you'd still recognize who they are, right?
Good point.
Though without my backpack, I'm more like a slug than a snail.
Was it Oshino who said it, or did Hanakawa? I forget, but yeah, snails and slugs are basically the same. Slugs are snails whose shells retrogressed, or something.
But it feels weird when there's something left after their shells to evolve like a bird that can't fly. Or with humans, isn't it like saying I lost all my bones but I'm still alive, I'm doing fine?
If you consider the shell an exoskeleton, I guess, but in terms of its role, isn't it more like their skin? Not that I'm sure a human could survive without any.
Yes, it's hard to say for sure. But you've proven it's possible to lose all your bones and survive, Mr. Araragi.
Right. As a boneless chicken, I've proven no such thing, damn you.
Because the hermit crab is so unforgettable, we assume a snail's shell could be removed. If you actually did that, the snail dies. Pretty important innards seem to be stuffed in there.
Like with your backpack.
Well, there's nothing that important in mine. It wouldn't trouble me not to have them. It's just that you holding on to my belongings sickens me, Mr. Araragi.
It would only mean Mayoi Hachikuji turning into Mayoi Makyuzi. Wait, did we already make this joke before?
I'm not too sure because I wasn't there, but didn't you? For the anime's alternate voice track?
Dear I did reuse it, oh dear.
I think recycling is fair game as long as it's across different media. And that's a parallel world anyway. I do think you might want to avoid that joke so people don't start associating you with slugs.
I am based on a snail, though. Not much of a difference. It being a cat for Miss Hanakawa makes me jealous.
Huh?
The same goes for your demon.
Ah.
Is something the matter?
No. Well, kids love snails, don't they? While slugs creep them out. Having or not having that shell makes a big difference.
Maybe not so much these days. And snails do have a lot of parasites.
Parasites?
In my case, you, Mr. Araragi.
I see. In your case, me hold on a sec. Do you calling your parasite?
You've been doing that a lot today. Going along with it, I personally feel that kind of humor is embarrassing in writing.
I've heard of that before, though. What was that snail parasite called? Again. The really scary type that takes over the brain. The Reuchloridium.
How very much like you that we find a scrambled loli in there.
Oh, God. Did I throw a perfect alley-oop for you to dunk on me with?
You've got it, Mr. Araragi. If you kind of try, you can also mishear a lewd in there. What a nasty parasite.
Just the worst. No! Why are we trying at all?
Can we discuss how we might make the DM part interesting too?
I'm not helping you brainstorm names to call me. But really, the leucochloridium is a real scary kind of parasite, isn't it? Just hearing about what it does gives you the chills. It attaches to a snail, makes it move to a place where it's more easily eaten by a bird, and even transforms the eye stalk so it stands out. Sure, you might think I'm worthless, but I wish you wouldn't lump me in with those things.
I'm only joking.
I know that, but still.
Hachikuji and I chattered on the way in this fashion, until we arrived at the Araragi residence. Or in other words, my house. We go on endlessly anytime we start bantering, but it never amounted to much. Though this one case may have been an exception. That is, when I think back on it now. The talk about the evolution, retrogression, and so on of snails and slugs, and the stuff regarding the leucochloridium parasite might have actually foreshadowed things about this story to a rather ironic extent, but really, calling it foreshadowing is just an example of the so-called Barnum effect. You can say anything you want after the fact. When I think back on it, considering how humanity has been jerked around by those convenient, convincing words, my view sounds like a plain delusion. Thinking back is the only way you can think about things, and even if you wanted to dispute that, people should only bother thinking about the future anyway. I should have learned that more than well enough, after my time travel. Okay, Hachikuji, come on in. I tried nonchalantly to invite her in, but she replied with a face that said, "What the hell did he just say?"
Mr. Araragi, you know the only time I'll ever enter your house is for your weight.
While I'm hurt by your shocking language, some part of me also feels happy that you come to my wake, but...
You've become an oddly positive person in the short time since we last met.
Well, I did go through a handful of inconceivable life experiences.
In any case, I won't enter your house. For as long as you live, I'll never cross the Araragi residence threshold. Yesterday was the last occasion, or actually, wouldn't you say even yesterday was half like an abduction?
An abduction? Don't make it sound so scandalous.
But it's the truth. Please don't feel like you can say whatever you want just because the original text isn't available anymore.
I'm not denying that it happened. I'm just asking you not to make it sound so scandalous.
How selfish. Anyway, Mr. Araragi, I haven't lost my garish sense of caution to the point that I'd enter your home when both your parents and your little sisters must be absent.
Hachikuji said, caution crackling in her eyes. There was no feeling or relationship of trust in them. They were suspicion itself. Makes my body tingle to have such eyes on me. Cut it out, you're 10 years old.
I'd be 21 if I were alive.
See, now you're killing my buzz.
Don't let my actual age kill it.
You used to shy away from smashing my dreams with that sort of line. Why would you suddenly go and let me down?
Well, you know, things have gotten a lot stricter after Tokyo implemented those youth ordinances. Going forward, this girl is going to have to state that she's over 18 and legal, or else we may be subject to damaging rumors.
Legal? I thought that ordinance didn't take actual ages into account.
Did it not? I don't know. I'm just a kid.
What's your positioning here, damn it? Are you a child or an adult?
I'm legally an adult, but physically a child.
Not that you have a physical body.
To be serious for a moment, it doesn't matter if there's an ordinance. The manga and anime industries were busy censoring themselves before it ever passed. They say it'll impede creative freedom, but it's been that way for some time now, in fact. Moaning about government regulations when you're already sucking up to whoever is paying you is pretty pathetic.
Don't get serious like that with zero warning.
We at least ought to remain free among it all. I'm Melee Hachikuji, 10 years old. I'll show you my panties.
That's a little too free.
Oh, but was just showing panties alright? I heard that the ordinance wouldn't affect my friend Shizuka from Doraemon.
Well, I doubt they can regulate Doraemon. And wait, why my friend Shizuka? Who are you anyway? Are you important?
Yes, Doraemon is something of a national manga. Worst case, you'd even alienate international opinion. Still, if I may, Doraemon simply is erotic.
No weird readings of that historic masterpiece. But sure, all of its secret tools are true to human desire and can easily be abused all day long.
I believe, Mr. Araragi, that 4 out of 5 elementary school boys owe their sexual awakening to Doraemon. How long is the Agency of Cultural Affairs going to turn a blind eye to this state of affairs?
I'm curious about the 5th boy.
Wakame from Sazi-san.
Our conversation gave me a lot to think about the legacy, both positive and negative, of nationally acclaimed manga. I also felt that the 5th boy was kinda kinky. Wait, that had to be fake data. Stop making things up. In that case, just wait here for a minute. I'll run and grab your backpack.
You're 10 seconds. Sprint!
A haughty tone. For some reason, I was now a 10-year-old girl's gopher. No, a 21-year-old woman's? Makes my body tingle either way. Well, since her 11 years as a ghost weren't any that accumulated. Hachikuji would never turn 21. That, too, my time traveling had made painfully clear. A historical fact. Leaving Hachikuji to wait at our freshly built gate, I went in and climbed the stairs to get her backpack from my room. I felt like swapping out her backpack's contents and filling it with stones in a pang of goatish mischief, but no stones were to be found in my room, naturally, so I gave up on the idea. Now, let me swear to all the gods above while I'm narrating that I really didn't mess with the backpack after Hachikuji left it in my room the day before. I may be a nasty parasite, but I'm not so criminal that I'd put my hands on a girl's personal belongings. I'm chivalrous. A gentleman. I didn't want to make Hachikuji wait for too long, so I shouldered her backpack and headed outside again, not stopping to sit down or enjoy a cup of coffee.
Hey! Don't be touching my property!
That's asking for too much.
Yikes, I'll have to take it to the cleaners.
Haven't you been hating me a little too hard today?
I don't want it anymore. Go ahead and throw it out.
Weren't we saying you'd turn into Maoi Makuzi without this?
The way you're forcing it onto me is creepy. You've bugged it, haven't you? You scum!
Why be that suspicious of me? What a hassle. Just read Kabuki. It'll prove my innocence.
I'm not buying such an expensive book.
Don't call it expensive.
$16? Imagine how many $8 pocket-sized books I could buy with that kind of money.
Just 2. Can't you at least call it bulky instead of expensive? The total word count should be about even. Give me a break. Why the negative promotion when she's in its chapter title?
Of course, fixed retail prices for books could become a thing of the past in Japan, too. The current resale system seems to be reaching its limits, and we're getting closer and closer to the age of electronic books. I don't know if they're a black ship, a rescue boat, or a privateer vessel.
E-books, huh? You know, they're surprisingly good for reading manga. It's shocking how well the color black shows up on them.
Yes, that's true. The ink can sometimes be too light in magazines. It could be that the better the art, the more you want to see it as digital data.
If there's a problem with the format, it's the 2-page spreads. Phones will show you one panel at a time, but manga's strength is its free control of the display size. Still, we might end up getting used to it.
After all, panel layouts were incredibly straightforward until just a couple of dozen years ago. Like 4 long horizontal panels in a row. The art was simple too. It could be that we're experiencing a renaissance in many ways.
Calling it a renaissance implies that we're learning from the past, though. Maybe that was the case for the panel layouts, yet while I did bring it up, I'm not too knowledgeable on the topic. How do cellular phones deal with the complicated paneling you typically find in girls' comics? Spreads might be the least of our problems.
And more manga is getting serialized on the internet?
Right, online magazines? In that sense, the manga industry's gates have widened for rookies. Not to mention the new print magazines that keep getting launched. Closing our eyes, for the moment, to the fact that existing ones are going on hiatus, one after the other. In light of those developments, manga might actually be a super stable line of work. Lots of long-running series nowadays, and the skills are pretty transferable.
That's an awfully optimistic view. But like you were saying about the paneling, and how manga's strength is adjusting the display size, I think another strength is being able to continue one story for as long as its popularity and its creator's stamina lasts.
Well, culturally, novels are a bit different in that regard. I think it's a matter of different release formats. The magazine serialization is the main thing for comics, but it's the book for fiction. A novel's nature is that of a one-shot in terms of comics. It's very discreet whether you like it or not.
Don't forget the fiction franchise that repeatedly pretends the series is over but comes back to life like a zombie each time and chooses to drag on forever.
Stop it. Stop with the masochism.
Kinda said. I think electronic books will become prevalent all at once if they can solve the pricing issue. Just as long as they set it at a point that won't see anyone starving.
Starving. In this slump, that feels like it's easier said than done.
Considering the bother of turning them into convenient electronic data, I think they could be sold for more than real books, in fact.
How patronizing. See. As if it were a seller's market.
There just needs to be more added value, like search functions or links to foreshadowing that let you come right back to it, or the ability to revisit the character intro at any moment, or voice actors reading the lines.
All of those are pretty far from our image of a book. I could feel myself being left behind by the times. And I'm only in high school. Still, it's not something you can readily accept without an elite education in it, so to speak. From your earliest days, I don't even feel comfortable with cell phones, not having gotten one till I was a high school student. Text messages, they make me panic a little even now.
It's fine, Mr. Araragi. Be glad that you're present for the genesis of a new culture and aware of the fact.
I wonder. I'd have preferred to take my sweet time enjoying it after it's become the norm. Also, a ghost telling me how I should feel over being present? Not that a half-vampire could say it better.
I envy people who are there for the emergence of cell phones. They can post their own incoming call notifications with cords.
Is that so enviable?
Now you can download a ringtone by pressing a button. But either way, isn't it a good opportunity? The publishing industry could use a revolution.
A revolution? I just hope it doesn't implode in the process. Brooding over the future of publishing with an elementary schooler, I started to get hungry. It was getting to be about that time. As a vampire, I don't need to adhere to that strict of a meal schedule, but habits not to harken back to what we were saying are hard to shake, and it wasn't every day that I ran into Hachikuji. Why not treat ourselves to lunch? Is there anything you want to eat, Hachikuji?
I could name many dishes, but no, nothing if it has to be with you.
Hey. Weird. Did Hachikuji always hate me this much? It's been so long I couldn't even guess why. Come to think of it, was the last time we talked at this much length actually Nice? That, indeed, would be quite a while ago.
Well, Miss Hanakawa and Miss Kanbari and Miss Sengoku had organized Kitaka and hijack your role as narrator.
Hold on a second. Chronologically, it wouldn't make sense for us to know about Kanbaro and Sengoku.
I never thought that Miss Sengoku would turn out that way. How frightening.
Stop it. It really would cause a time paradox if I knew about that now. Sengoku is just my cute little junior.
I want to say that was the problem.
By the way, aren't you ever going to narrate?
The rule is that beings are nothing but aberrations. Can't become narrators.
So there was a rule about that? I looked down at my shadow. Right. So this time too. All joking aside, isn't there anything you want to eat? My treat.
Oh, as you are aware though, I'm a ghost. If you lunched with me, Mr. Araragi, you'd be looked at like parents who order food for their deceased daughter, too.
I don't mind. While that didn't matter, if Hachikuji ate real food, how would that eaten food be treated in reality? Normal people couldn't see her, but they could see her food. Would the food in her organs look like it's floating in space? That couldn't be it. It's not like things look like they're floating just because Hachikuji is holding them. Maybe it all gets patched over by the brain of whoever sees it happening. Of course, if anyone's brain is patching things over, it could be mine, recognizing a human who died 11 years ago. But that's just a hypothetical ghost. It's my treat, but I'm a penniless student getting ready for his college exams. We'd only be able to go to a fast food place.
Fast food?
Not enough for you?
It makes you want to fast? That would be more than enough.
Give me a break. Wrong sense of the English word. As a student studying for exams, I at least know that much. Well, get on my bike. Let's ride together.
No way, Mr. Araragi. Riding behind you.
And then, just as Hachikuji started to give another one of her answers in the I Hate Mr. Araragi session that seemed to be all the rage with her. It already had its hooks in me, and I was on the edge of my seat waiting for her answer but wasn't able to hear it to the end because that's when we spotted something. If you ask me what it was, it's a mystery. A mystery, that's the only answer I could give, but not because I or Hachikuji was lacking in knowledge about aberrations. Well, of course it was partly that too, but not the only reason. I say this because we, or at least I couldn't really tell if it was even an aberration. I couldn't identify what it was, since I couldn't see it. While it does feel like a bit of a contradiction to say that I spotted something that I couldn't see, in this instance it'd be the most suitable expression. Although I couldn't see it, it wasn't at all transparent meanwhile. With the ghost girl known as Mayoi Hachikuji, whom regular people couldn't witness as we discussed earlier, I'm not going to make a given up on the ghost joke here. It would be unfunny and inappropriate. It's not necessarily that she can't be seen, because not witnessing means rejecting even the recognition that it can't be seen. Not noticing that you can't see it. In other words, it's not there. What can't be recognized doesn't exist. That logic stands in the confines of the human brain, at least. And in this case, I was able to recognize it, which I couldn't see. I recognized that it couldn't be seen, because after all, there was a darkness there. A darkness, a blackness, if you want. Or just plain black. To repeat myself, it was the middle of the day, the middle of a midsummer day. At that, with sunlight pouring down on us from the sky. Weather that could make you start sweating just standing still. It was in an environment with simply excellent visibility that it appeared out of nowhere. That darkness. I could try to interpret this phenomenon. Vision amounts to reflections and wavelengths of light. So if something doesn't reflect it, the area is displayed as black, for example. Coal looks so black because it has a high rate of light absorption. Or better, black holes can't ever be observed by the eye because they bend and suck everything into them. Including light, it seems like there's just a darkness there. Only, we weren't in space. There's no way a black hole could have emerged. No way I'd be fine if a black hole did this close to me. For one thing, well, no. Actually, no. Even if this darkness wasn't a black hole, if it was just a lump of coal, there was no guarantee that I or we would be fine. It felt like the darkness moved. Just barely. It was instinct, intuition, a bad feeling. If you insist, it was experience. I immediately straddled my bike and Hachikuji wasn't any slower to act, because despite her earlier firm refusal in the making to ride together with me, she leapt onto the cargo rack.
Step on it, please.
I know. Directed by Hachikuji for some reason, I began pedaling as hard as I could at top speed from the first downstroke. I wanted to exploit my leg strength as a vampire, but unfortunately it wasn't good for much in the middle of the day. True, subjected to a vampire's full leg strength, no mere granny bike could hold itself together. Probably the chain would blow off. So pedaling in a standing stance like a dead serious human might have been just about right. I felt like ever since Kanbaru destroyed my mountain bike, I was really abusing this granny bike. Yeah, it really deserved some maintenance work already. Of course, that was only if we had any future to upkeep. In any case, I pedaled as hard as I could. Apparently bicycles can break the speed limit under Japan's Road Traffic Act too, but I ignored that fact as hard as I could. To me, some things are worth protecting more than the law. I count my own life among them. I might run over a pedestrian if I barreled down the sidewalk at that speed, so I descended onto the road and began going even faster. Hachikuji.
Yes!
Check behind us. Is that thing following us?
Something is.
Come to think of it, while I'd known Hachikuji for a pretty long time, I'd only ever chatted with her on the roadside for the most part and never seen her so flustered before. Maybe the only other times were, well, when I assaulted her.
Which is to say, every time we meet.
She quipped, dutifully, even on this occasion. What a nice kid. We could be lifelong friends. When you say something is like how?
Well, like it's there when you notice. Like it's not close, but not far.
The phrasing was pretty ambiguous by Hachikuji's standards, but I couldn't blame her. After all, that darkness couldn't be seen, in which case its distance wasn't to be fathomed accurately either. No, not just its distance. Its size, its scope and scale, so to speak, were also an enigma. We only knew it lurked there, or rather, existed there, and had to judge based on the surrounding scenery, but that could change in an instant if you shifted your angle. Plus, we were moving at a high speed on a bicycle. Of course, her phrasing was ambiguous, but in any case, that it seemed to be coming after us was enough. Okay, got it. No need to check anymore. Instead of pedaling in a standing stance, I sat down. I was faster when I stood in terms of pure speed, but the cargo behind me, a young girl, made it a different story. Hachikuji, grab onto my back.
No way!
Don't refuse, you idiot. I'm off balance. With a very unbecoming tongue click for a young girl, Hachikuji complied in what was probably a reluctant manner. This combined our centers of gravity, letting me go even faster. Not to mention, I risked flinging off Hachikuji if I pedaled at full speed while standing.
Would it be better if I also threw away my backpack?
Nah. To be honest, I'd have been grateful if she had. I wasn't sure if the ghost girl had any weight or if I was just feeling it on my own, but real or not, heavier meant heavier. In other words, like Hachikuji herself, the backpack felt as heavy as it looked. If she chucked it, I could expect to go even faster still. That was a big still. You don't have to throw it away.
But I can come back for it later.
I said it's fine. It was her own suggestion, and she was right that she could just pick it up later. Hachikuji's idea was absolutely sensible, but it somehow felt wrong. Our speed might actually fall if she did. Or so I imagine. It was just my imagination, after all, but I've lived my whole life faithful to whatever I imagined. Instead, Hachikuji hugged me tighter, like you're trying to merge with me.
Okay.
Push your chest even harder into me.
I like this.
Perhaps because it was an emergency, once Hachikuji made up her mind, she docilely obeyed me. Her body, ripe for a fifth grader's, pressed unsparingly against my own, converting this joy into energy. I pedaled even harder. Hachikuji, with more of a grinding motion.
Oh, okay.
Hachikuji, probably a bit confused, was at my beck and call. You never knew what life had in store for you, whether it was feeling Hachikuji all across your back or being chased by an inexplicable darkness. I may need to offer an excuse at this point. Sure, it's understandable to be frightened by a mysterious darkness appearing out of nowhere, but why commit so thoroughly to flight? Some of you may be wondering, why desperately pedal away from something that, while unknown, might not be dangerous? Allow me to reply. Yes, I thoroughly needed to take flight. If you think that's pathetic, then go ahead and think it all you want. But how often I've had to go through hell because I didn't run when I should have, like I was now. I'm a veteran. Having witnessed all kinds of suspicious since spring break and fought them, I can state that I was utterly, undoubtedly, 100% following the correct course of action at that moment. Now was the time to run. By no means was I going to let myself face off against that darkness. It'd be one thing if only my person was on the line, but right now I had to protect my dear little friend Mayoi Hachikuji. What's my excuse for taking advantage of the chaos to savor that little friend with my back? Well, I haven't got any for you. I'm not ashamed at all. Mr. Araragi.
What is it, pig boobies?
It's coming after us. I'd told her she didn't have to look behind anymore, but it seemed like she had. Since there was no particular change in the sensation on my back. She must have contorted herself. Like twisted her neck 180 degrees. It was pretty scary to visualize.
It might be getting closer.
I thought we couldn't tell.
Well, I can't. Not the distance, but it feels oppressive.
Hachikuji's testimony made even less sense now at this rate. Maybe I had to turn around myself to check out the darkness. But no, that might be a bad idea. Recognition. If the darkness was an aberration, it needed to be recognized, but there were also risks to recognizing an aberration, quite big ones. Some aberrations curse you simply for observing them. They emerge by being seen, which is to say, the darkness might be an aberration that activates when it's spotted. True, in that case I'd already seen it, so maybe there wasn't any point in averting my eyes now. Maybe there wasn't any point in ghosting a ghost. Hachikuji, just stop looking at it.
But...
Be a good girl and kiss my back.
Oh, okay.
It was hard to say if my mysterious request was romantic or humiliating, but Hachikuji complied anyway. It only got my shirt soaked with saliva, though, and felt yucky. Make that scary. Don't be eating my back. I remembered hearing that snails have over 10,000 teeth. In fact, was my back going to be all right? My will isn't so unbreakable that I have the right to criticize others, but it seemed like Mayoi Hachikuji was lacking in mental toughness. Being this weak in the face of adversity was rare. Actually, wasn't it rare for any story character to be weak in the face of adversity? I mean, you wouldn't have any stories to tell then. Come on, show your brilliance. Was your usual unflappable attitude? And then, I carelessly saw it. The darkness. It's not as if I turned around. The towns are funny, they have mirrors all over the place, whether or not that's for Kamen Rider Ryuki's ease of transformation, at traffic crossings for instance. And it was in the mirror that I accidentally saw the darkness. It seemed to grow the moment I did, though it might have been my imagination. My imagination? Then, that was everything. I turned the handlebars of my bike as if to escape not just from the darkness, but the mirror it was reflected in. I was basically sliding on my tires and nearly fell over, but somehow maintained my balance, leaning almost far enough to scrape my cheek on the asphalt. It felt like I was at about a 170-degree angle. I'm amazed I made it back up. Hachikuji, are you okay?
I snapped one of my feelers.
Isn't that really bad? And wait, did humans have feelers? I guess that'd be the skin, but can you snap your skin?
I misspoke. One of my pigtails came undone.
Oh. She'd frighten me for nothing.
Also, my blouse shoulder tore just a bit.
Are we okay?
Yes, it's just my clothes. But with part of my hair undone and my blouse torn, I look like I'm in the middle of being assaulted and abducted by you. That's the picture.
That's not okay at all. It was bad news for my future. What was going to happen to me? But then another, more imminent danger approached me. To be precise, I was approaching it. At the end of our hard turn was a traffic light, of all things. You know, one of those red, yellow, and green things. No, not red, yellow, and green, it was red. Heck. I had, well, two options. It was ridiculous to be thinking about it, but two. Either blow through the light, or don't. Looking around me as I flew forward, I saw neither pedestrians nor cars. Even if I ignored the signal, didn't hit the brakes, and cut straight across the light, it probably wouldn't cause any kind of accident. It wouldn't, but... Scow. Once again I turned the handlebars. A red light. Feeling Hachikuji against my back. I couldn't ignore the light. Even if it wouldn't lead to an accident, I couldn't possibly, not while carrying Hachikuji, who died 11 years ago, in a traffic accident, behind me. But this is where I failed. No, it's hard to call part of it a mistake since I couldn't have made the turn, in any case, without hitting the brakes and slowing down. The problem was my other failure. Yes, I'd forgotten. I was riding on the road, so the signals meant something different. If the light in front of me was red, any turn, whether right or left, was just as prohibited as going straight. Stop on red. Unable to uphold that rule, failing to do so with Hachikuji on my back. There was no room for mercy, and heaven would punish me for it. We turned, and it was right in front of us. The darkness. Almost like it was a pity trap waiting for us there this whole time. Inke! I couldn't tell our distance from it. Or maybe there wasn't any from the start, with this phenomenon. As if it was always right there and far or close didn't matter crap. I couldn't change directions now, I just turned my handlebars as far as they could go. Believing that I was fleeing single-mindedly, unwaveringly, I ended up putting a period to the game of tag by plunging straight into the darkness. Self-ruin. Auto-destruct. A completely pointless escape aid. Running, confounded from a confounding thing, caught up to in confounding fashion. It was confoundedly over. But Hachikuji, at least, was still munching on my back. I might have made her, but what a thing to be doing at the end of the line. She was wrecking the serious mood, but I somehow had to peel off Hachikuji, who literally had her teeth in me, and let her escape. This girl, at least.
Unlimited rulebook.
And then, I heard a quiet droning voice from somewhere, and was blasted away. Not the darkness lying in wait to me. Us. It felt like a giant hammer had sent us flying, and maybe that described the actual phenomenon. A brutally physical aberration, far more defined than the darkness. By the time I realized it, Hachikuji and I had been blown into the opposite lane. Some sort of thing had happened and rescued us. Only our wheels didn't make it, and my granny bike seemed to be swallowed up by the darkness ersatz. After all this time, having survived one crisis after another alongside me, my granny bike finally exited this world. It was quite a shock. I was so depressed that I could die. What was I supposed to ride to school the next day?
Kind monster, sir, over this way.
And there, suddenly, was Ononoki. Yotsugi Ononoki, an expressionless tween girl whose terribly frilly, cute and visually quite striking outfit was all thrown out of balance by her expressionlessness. Like a doll trying too hard to act human. She can't help it though. While she isn't a doll, she isn't human either. She too is an aberration known as Yotsugi Ononoki, a certain violent... Huh? Wait, Ononoki? Why are you here?
What do you mean? I met you just yesterday.
Did she? She did. Thanks to my time travel, those memories were out of sync with reality. Was it like jet lag? Ononoki had appeared just as abruptly as the darkness, but judging by the situation, she seemed to have saved Hachikuji and me. Thank and I.
It might be a little early to be thanking me.
She was absolutely right. The menacing darkness was still on the street. Not having vanished or anything, it continued to exist right there. A darkness we couldn't see continuing to exist is a pretty weird formulation, but then it was that kind of phenomenon.
Kind monster, sir. What is that?
Huh? Really, Ononoki? Isn't your role to appear out of nowhere, save me, and explain everything?
I'm not sure I can handle your spoiled expectations.
Expressionless as she was, Ononoki sounded overwhelmed. Well, no wonder. Just saving us deserved our thanks. Though Ashino might say that people just go and get saved on their own. As for Hachikuji, her arms around my torso, still clutching my body and even biting into the flesh of my back, the ghost girl Maoi Hachikuji had passed out as far as I could tell. How mentally weak was she anyway? I'm so let down by you. I ripped her off me. Regardless of what we were going to do next, about the only activity that suited her posture was riding together on a bicycle. Loosening her grip was one thing, but getting her teeth out of my back was pretty rough. Maybe she did have 10,000 of them.
Good grief.
It was hard to read her emotions from her toneless voice. She was like the old Senjo Gahara in a way, which is why I feel some affinity for Ononoki.
I carelessly saved you, but at this rate maybe I should have left you alone. Did I get caught up in some confounding business? Talk about hard luck. Give a guy a break.
That's right. I thought about the kid whom I'd chronologically met just yesterday, but internally felt like I hadn't seen in a good long while. Ononoki applies male identifiers to herself. Don't say you should have left us alone. Life is a valuable thing.
Says an immortal vampire. And is that girl the ghost you mentioned yesterday? She sure is wearing a backpack, so you managed to return it. Good.
Yesterday. Did I mention Hachikuji? It was so far back that I didn't remember. Well, in addition to being an aberration, Ononoki frequently worked alongside an expert, if only as a familiar, so I guess it was natural, but she could see. Ononoki could see Hachikuji. And just as naturally, the darkness too.
Kind monster, sir.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
What do I want to do?
With that.
Ononoki pointed, with her index finger, at the darkness on the street. She pointed at the unmoving darkness, which seemed to be observing us as though it was the one witnessing us. Pointing. For Ononoki, already an offensive maneuver. Unlimited rulebook. She only needed to point to activate it. Its power was something my body knew firsthand. Not my body, technically, so much as half of my body.
Fight or flight?
Flight. That's not the kind of thing you try to fight.
Yes. I agree.
I thought she might mock me for being a coward, but she lowered her finger right away. Almost as if that was her plan from the beginning. Seriously. There was no reading this kid. Inscrutable, just like the old Senjo Gahara.
We're running away. Hold that child, kind monster, sir.
Got it.
As gently as you can, slowly, not making any noise. That thing might react to it and attack.
Was it a beast, or what? Well, true. Aberrations might be animalistic, primitively speaking, and they do tend to have a creature motif. Not that any beast could be darkness itself. In any case, I did as Ononoki said, and slowly picked up Hachikuji's body. Without making a sound, I slipped a hand under her neck, checked inside her skirt, held her legs, and cradled her against my chest.
I feel like you added an unnecessary action there.
Excuse me, what if there was an aberration inside her skirt?
Fat chance, bastard.
Scolded Ononoki, somewhat abrasively. I assumed it was her Almayoji's influence on her, but the kid's character traits could be pretty inconsistent.
Okay.
And then, almost the moment I stood up, with Hachikuji, in a so-called bridal carry, Ononoki grabbed me by the collar.
Unlimited rulebook, the disengagement edition.
Honestly, Ononoki's what, special move? She uses it quite a lot, so I don't think it's a secret technique. Anyway, I don't really understand her unlimited rulebook ability or skill and how it works. I've heard that she's a Tsukumogami, or an artifact spirit, and what's more, the Tsukumogami of a corpse, but that too, or being a Tsukumogami in the first place, is something I don't really understand. Her offensive power, I'm well acquainted with. The Araragi residence's front entrance ended up needing to be rebuilt thanks to her offensive, or even destructive power, so I don't need to take anyone's word for that. It's the reason I vaguely assumed that Ononoki was a Shikigami, or familiar, specializing in offense, but now that we'd safely escaped, I have no choice but to say to my surprise that I was mistaken. Come to think of it, the omioji she serves, namely Yozuru Kadinui, is a ridiculously offensive fighter. So why would her partner Ononoki be specialized entirely in offense? Who would put together a team that lopsided? If anything, the unlimited rulebook might be a skill for escaping. I couldn't get away from that darkness for all I'd pedaled my bike, but she made a perfect getaway, literally burdened by the two of us. To explain what she actually did though, she just seemed to jump as hard as she could, using both of her legs.
No, kind monster, sir? That's correct. While I gave it a cool name like the Disengagement Edition, we simply ran away.
Simply?
However, we did so vertically. Since you'd proved that horizontal flight was meaningless, thought it might have trouble dealing with up and down movements, looks like I nailed it.
I felt somehow bamboozled, but at the end of the day, we'd gotten away, and that's all that mattered. So, if you're wondering where we escaped to, we were now in a place with a lot of memories for me. Ever since spring break, a hidden base of sorts, where I once staged a lethal battle with Ononoki and her master, Kagenui. In other words, the abandoned cram school. We were on the ruins' 4th floor. One of its 3 classrooms was serving as our resting spot. Finding rest in ruins might sound strange, but having gotten away from that darkness, there was no reason for us not to feel relieved. Hachikuchi was still passed out. Placing her on the floor would be crude even under the circumstances, so I put some nearby desks together to make a bed just like Ashino used to and laid her there. While Hachikuji was grown for a 5th grader, she was still an elementary schooler. 3 desks put together was enough. Having put my shirt over her in place of a blanket, then balled up my jeans for her to use as a pillow, I was in nothing but my underpants now. It was out of consideration for Hachikuji's well-being, so why did I just look like a pervert? Frankly, I could live without being branded an exhibitionist on top of everything else.
You're quite muscular, kind monster, sir.
Once we'd settled down?
Yep, those are good muscles. Good muscles. You must work out because those are good muscles. It was hard to tell from over your clothes, but those are some good muscles.
She was praising my muscles. But it's not like I worked out, it was just one of the effects of turning into a vampire over spring break.
How about staying undressed from now on? You should show off your muscles more, kind monster, sir. I think you have a fine odor mode physique.
Can we talk about something other than muscles?
Come on, don't be like that. How about some poses? As a way to thank me for saving you.
Little girl's trying to guilt trip me, huh?
If you showed me an abs and thighs pose, I might not mind sharing the secret of my unlimited rulebook.
Isn't that a pretty important secret? The kid was a mess, though again, it reminded me of Senjogahara. Except she never reacted to my muscles. Someone getting this into them was troubling, but no reaction at all was, in its own way, sad. Yeah, I can't deny that I'm interested in the unlimited rulebook. But what I really want to know about right now is that darkness. Do you really not have any idea, Ononoki?
I said I don't know.
She came to touch my abs as she spoke. She did it so casually that I nearly overlooked it, but this was outright groping.
Your muscles are the only thing I know about, kind monster, sir.
What do you know about my muscles?
What don't I know?
When Ononoki asserted this with her blank look, she was surprisingly convincing. Maybe she did find out, somehow. It could even be that, wait, find what out? Geez, there's no secret to my muscles.
Well, what about you, kind monster, sir? Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea?
Emphasize it as you might, that's not a very good pun or play on words. No idea. Maybe I did though, I had too good of an idea. You could even say my whole life was the idea. That said, if you were to ask what it might be in particular, I'd have to throw up my hands. Every aberration has its reasons, sure, but was that unreasonable, unidentifiable darkness even describable as an aberration? Unreasonable, unidentifiable, and of unknown cause. I don't know. It's not like I'm an expert on aberrations. I'm just a dime a dozen pseudo-vampiric high schooler.
I don't think there are even a dozen of those.
In fact, thinking back on all the aberrations I've dealt with, a vampire, a cat, a crab, a snail, a monkey, a snake, a bee and a bird. Also, a corpse. There's something different about it. I've never seen an aberration as abstract as darkness itself. What kind of aberrational phenomenon is it supposed to be? That there was any in the middle of the day already felt odd. Well, aberrations appearing only at night, during the witching hour and so on, might just be a preconception, but for it to be that clear. No, clear it wasn't, not when it couldn't be seen.
Darkness. True, it must be darkness.
What?
Well, how do I put this? I hope what we're up against really is darkness. That it's just darkness.
Oninoki remained expressionless, like she felt nothing, but also like she might be finding our situation simply tedious. What do you mean? That thing is darkness, no matter how you look at it.
But you can't look at it, can you? That black mass is much more likely to be just a phenomenon accompanying an aberration.
Oh, okay.
If we start saying that, though, we can't be sure if we're even up against it. Maybe it wasn't in order to come after you that it appeared. Kind monster, sir. Just as a typhoon or a storm or any other meteorological phenomenon isn't going after a person.
But then that thing was obviously after me and Hachikuchi.
Right.
Ononoki sounded so indecisive.
No good. I'm just too captivated by your muscles to get my thoughts straight.
It's fine that you're having trouble getting your thoughts straight, but could you go find a different reason?
My sister might know something, but I can't get in contact with her right now.
It goes without saying that by sister Ononoki meant Yuzuru Kagenui, the violent Amiage. Indeed, being an expert and also an old acquaintance of Ashino, she might possess some knowledge about that object, if it even was one. She might, but actually, I was more relieved than anything to hear that Ononoki couldn't contact her. Kagenui is one of those types I'd rather not deal with for the rest of my life, although things probably won't go that way. Where is she, by the way, and what's she doing? It must be work, right?
Yes, it's work. And of course the details are a secret. Why are you being so nosy? The nerve.
I wasn't asking to be nosy. I was only trying to be polite, but the Onmoji community took confidentiality much more seriously than I'd expected.
If you really want to know, you could offer me those muscles.
Yikes, offer them like how?
Gouge some out and feed it to me.
Talk about scarring. It seemed like we were on the same page, but we weren't. Whatever, it's not like it's a problem if we can't get in touch with her. We'll figure it out once night falls anyway.
Why is that? Do you suddenly become bright after dark?
No, I don't come with such a useful function, it's just when Shinobu wakes up. Ononoki visibly grimaced when she heard the name. A normally expressionless face twisting into a grimace really underscored the level of disgust. It was hard to blame her though. Once upon a time, in this very abandoned cram school, Ononoki nearly got murdered by Shinobu. No, that's not a good way to put it. Shinobu was clearly playing around then. She just toyed with Ononoki. Of course it'd make her resentful. Of course she'd hate her. In any case, I pretended not to notice her reaction and continued. Appearances aside, she's the king of aberrations. She'd be well versed on the subject even if it weren't for a months-long elite education at the hands of Mimoshino, a pro just like Kagenui. Shinobu's an even greater expert than the experts. In other words, she has to know something about that darkness, which is why we're bound to learn what it really is once she wakes up.
Ka.
Spat Ononoki, not hiding her displeasure. She had a lot to learn as a human being. I thought no wonder, she was an aberration. Since she used to be human, maybe it was more accurate to say she'd learned to be too aberrational.
I'm not buying the knowledge of a geriatric like her.
Don't call Shinobu geriatric.
And once she wakes up, are you saying that wicked woman is asleep right now? Unbelievable, to think she'd be napping while her master is fighting for his life.
I'm not really her master. But when it came to that part of our relationship, things got hard to explain. At the very least, it was extremely difficult to convince someone like Ononoki, who had a perfect or a logically consistent master-servant relationship. Maybe the smart choice was to give up on trying from the start.
What? Are you not that vampire's master, kind monster, sir?
No, I am. I'm so much her master that it's almost like I'm not. She's constantly there waiting upon me. Ononoki looked at me like I was some sort of dangerous character. Yeah, I could see why. It's not like I can stop her from napping. Something tiring happened to her the other day. She's probably sound asleep right now.
So even a vampire like her gets tired. That's surprising.
Well, Shinobu too would get tired after traveling through time again and again. It might have been a different story had it been her at her peak. I don't think a half-day's worth of sleep will be enough to recover from all of that fatigue. But either way, all that needs to happen is for her to wake up, and then everything will be solved. No matter what that darkness is.
I wouldn't be overconfident if I were you. Whatever elite schooling that vampire received, there's no one in the world who knows everything about every aberration.
That also goes for my sister, and Mimo Shino added Ononoki. While it sounded like her opinion owed in part to her dislike for Shinobu, I could see some sense in it. If aberrations are something birthed by human cognition, then an infinite number of them could be born into eternity. True, there's no guarantee that Shinobu knows what the darkness is. But Ononoki, it doesn't matter even if she doesn't.
Why not?
Because she eats aberrations regardless of the identity of that unidentifiable thing, she can just gulp it down. We'll take emergency measures to escape this crisis for now, and we'll ask Hanakawa or someone later about the mystery behind the darkness.
Hanekawa? Who's that?
Someone who knows everything. In fact, I might have called Hanakawa right then and there, but having skipped our start of school ceremony made me reluctant. I could almost hear her reply, "Okay, I'll tell you, and you can even touch my breasts as much as you want, but could you please never talk to me again?"
I don't know about that.
I thought she was talking about my fantasy, but I was wrong.
I don't know about relying on someone for everything like that.
I don't think I rely on her for everything.
You mean you're supporting each other? They say no man is an island, but you're no man at all. Are you, kind monster, sir? Nor is that vampire, of course. I ought to warn you, the only person you can count on when it really matters is yourself.
Though it's not for me to say when I went and saved you, qualified Ononoki. True, I had no idea what would have happened to me if it weren't for her. So it did feel like a ridiculous self-contradiction.
By the by, I, Yatsugi Ononoki, shouldn't be here doing this. I told you yesterday that I'm in this town for work, remember?
Did you? Yeah, I didn't remember. So much happened afterwards. I'm not exaggerating, it was so much. You could even say my current situation wasn't too bad compared to that experience. Seeing how I found myself in this situation immediately after resolving that one, I did seem to be living a jam-packed life. What did I ever do? Well, lot, I guess. And as far as the time travel, that was entirely me sticking my own head into it. You're busy, huh, Ononoki?
Of course I am. Unlike you, I'm no happy-go-lucky fellow who needs to do nothing more than go to school and have fun. I have to work to live.
I wouldn't say that all I need to do is go to school and have fun.
You didn't even go to school today, did you?
Well, stuff happened.
Stuff happens to everyone. Don't make it sound like you're some special victim.
Okay. I got scolded by a tween girl, and I didn't have any excuse or retort either. Moreover, I was sitting there in just my underpants as a tween girl stood above me and took me to task. Not bad at all. Scold me.
I feel disgusted for some reason.
Seeming to sense something, Ononoki began to walk off. When she passed by my side, she ground her feet in my shadow in an obviously intentional way. She did this, of course, knowing that Shinobu was snoring away inside of it. This went deep.
I'll be going then.
Then, what? Back home?
Not home, really. Back to work.
You're not staying by my side for the rest of my life to protect me?
Where would you get that idea?
I'm joking. I do appreciate your protecting me even once. Actually, I haven't thanked you, have I? Thanks. I promise to repay this favor to you somehow.
Muscles?
No, with something other than muscles. If she insisted, maybe I could gouge one pack out from my 6 and give it to her. It'd heal later, given my vampirism, but such an exchange seemed to run afoul of ethical and humanitarian considerations in various ways. You know, like we couldn't come back from crossing that line. And anyway, wouldn't my gift of muscles disappear once I healed?
I've never actually been repaid by anyone promising to return this favor somehow, or repay this debt without fail. In fact, for someone like me who might disappear from the world at any given moment, the standard for favors and debts is immediate repayment.
Immediate repayment, then is there something I can do right now? I really did feel indebted to her. Now that I thought about it, bragging to her about Shinobu, whom she disliked, after being saved like that might have been rude. Could it have spoiled her mood and made her suddenly say she was leaving? Even if that wasn't it and she really was leaving because she had work, asking what it might be certainly wouldn't get me an answer. I still wanted to do what I could. Something you can do right now? Well, there's only so much I can do, but tell me what you want. At least, tell me. Onoki took a step back toward me for some reason. She came back and stepped on my shadow. Could she stop doing that on purpose?
Kind monster, sir. Look this way, Smooch.
She stole a kiss from me. Out of nowhere. It couldn't be described with a cute expression like she kissed me, and really felt like she'd stolen something. A surprise attack, like your wallet being taken without you even noticing I'd been shown a brilliant magic trick.
Wait, I was the victim! A victim!
Whatry? What are you doing? I tried to ask, but I was tongue-tied. I was just impressed that I didn't manage to bite my tongue. Who knew she might have even stolen that too?
Woo, did it. Uh-oh. Cheater, cheater! Kind monster, sir, you're scum.
What was this kid saying? What was she saying with her expressionless face? I wasn't positive, but it felt like she was saying something really scary.
Trusting relationships, that sort of thing. Well, I just wanted to teach you how easily they can crumble. I guess I've done you another favor instead of being repaid. Why, with all those favors you could hold a party, but I suppose I do feel a little better.
Ononoki said, turning her back on me as if I was a toy she'd lost interest in, and tossed aside and not even bothered to put away. It seemed like her cheater bit wasn't about my relationship with Senjo Gahara, but rather my ties with Shinobu. So she was getting back at Shinobu? Young girls are scary.
Well, do your best to survive this game you don't know the rules to.
This isn't a game.
Then what is it?
With that, Yatsugi Ononoki left the ruins, and I wouldn't say reluctantly. She'd gone back to work. I'm offering no excuses for kissing a tween girl. It was my fault for letting my guard down, that's all. While the cheater stuff Ononoki went on about was almost entirely a false accusation whether you looked at it from Senjo Gahara's point of view, or Shinobu's, I wasn't sure I wanted to report it to them. It seemed like the faithful thing to do between lovers, between partners, but also like I only wanted to in order to make myself feel better. If confessing my crime, and _mark, was going to force the burden of forgiveness on them, maybe it was better to keep it locked in my heart. There's no proof, and I'm the victim here. Putting it that way made me sound so shameless. Gosh, I had to deal with a fresh, volatile situation now of all times. Ugh, I wished I could die. The darkness could swallow me and I could die. Just kidding, but still. That's when I noticed my new predicament. Yet another, arising from Ononoki having left spine chilling. Damn it, Hachikuji and I were all alone. In a dim room in an abandoned building, at that. Plus Hachikuji was unconscious. Oh no, things were starting to get exciting. Hushing my breath, I glanced at the girl on the bed of desks who had yet to show any sign of waking up, who had been revealed to be weak in the face of adversity. Mayoi Hachikuji. If she's asleep, doesn't that mean it's okay for me to do anything? I approached her as I made this precarious remark. What was my rationale here? Why would I be touching Hachikuji? I was saving her life? Yes. Of course. Being unconscious for a long time could be risky, she could be in danger, and I needed to do something to wake her up. I was obviously the one in need of a wake-up call, but the absence of a straight man made this a sealed room. Not a single factor existed to restrain me.
'Tis thee who needs the wake-up call, dunce.
I had a straight man after all? Actually, I'd been hit by a blonde girl who came flying out of my shadow and her fist.
Vampire punch.
Treated to a solid punch with my guard all the way down, I went into a tailspin and flew through the air before crashing right into the wall. Once I crashed into it, she followed up with a low kick. A barefoot preteen girl's low kick. While it felt good, I also felt like I might die. What are you doing, Shinobu?
I ought to be asking thee that, fool. Why must I be forced to play the role of thy conscience? I can't even take a nap. And sheesh, while it felt good.
Her criticism couldn't have been more sensible. I never thought I'd be lectured in a sound manner by a vampire who lived in a domain far removed from human ethics and morality. I'm sorry, it was just an impulse, but I haven't done anything yet.
Of course ye have not. Had ye that low kick would have targeted thy family jewels.
Shinobu looked around as she spoke those terrifying words, and confirming the precarious situation whereby Hachikuji and I had been alone in the classroom of an abandoned cram school, she sighed.
Ah, 'twas a close shave indeed. It seems I chose the right time to wake up.
The right time, huh? Have you actually only slept for 2 hours? I looked out the window. It was far from dusk on the other side of the broken glass, and it seemed that the sun was still beating down.
And 'twas a restless sleep. I couldn't slumber soundly at all. I am as tired as when I went to bed.
Shinobu grouched, cracking her neck. I couldn't tell if she was grouchy because she couldn't sleep well, or because she was appalled by my stupid behavior. Well, it was probably just both.
What happened?
As I have told thee since thou and I are mentally paired, thine agitation is communicated to me. Whether I hide in thy shadow or slumber, it makes no difference. I can only assume that my sleep was so restless because something happened to thee.
Oh, well, the darkness. It was because I was chased by it, no doubt. Our senses were shared. Technically they weren't. It was a one-way street running from me to Shinobu, but not our memories, so it wasn't as if she already knew about all of that. Wait, really? Given her present demeanor, Shinobu certainly hadn't witnessed the darkness. But what about after that? Specifically, the act Ononoki and I engaged in, was Shinobu still asleep then? Or was she already awake? Which, just as Ononoki hated Shinobu, Shinobu wasn't partial to Ononoki. And if she'd been awake at that point, she'd likely have interfered. But then, maybe she was only half awake and in a haze.
By the way, is there not something ye ought to say to me?
What is it? Why was I feeling this pressure? Could it just be my imagination? Was my sense of guilt making me feel pressure when none was really there? Was the thing I ought to say simply thanks for reining me in? Was she just demanding my gratitude?
What's wrong?
I couldn't tell. In contrast to Ononoki's expressionless face, Shinobu was wearing a truly gruesome smile, but it was still a smile, which tended to be difficult to read. Maybe I'd try tricking her into telling me. With a perfect question, I'd pin down the moment she woke up, but Shinobu wasn't going to fall for any regular trick. I decided to be roundabout. Hey, Shinobu, you can adjust your hair to be however long you want, right?
If 'tis thy kiss scene with the Shikigami girl thou art wondering about, I saw it.
You're too good at piecing things together. I'd attempted a detour, but she'd taken a shortcut and grabbed me by the scruff of my neck. I looked at Shinobu. She was grinning with her fangs exposed. Miss Shinobu?
What? An apology? He'll apologize. I cannot wait to see how this man will apologize. For leaving me, his life partner, to the side and doing this deed with the little Shikigami girl from who knows where.
Now she was just annoying me. She was openly enjoying it. She looked like an 8-year-old child at the moment. But she was 500, or as I recently found out, closer to 600. A vampire as mature as they came. I had heard before that they lived to be about 200 on average, so even by that standard she had a lot of life experience. Not that she was exactly alive. She might actually be understanding enough to laugh off me cheating on her and even turn it into a joke. Too bad she wasn't ready to overlook a dalliance with Hachike, too. Well, if Shinobu was going to be an adult, I needed to act like one too. Instead of grumbling that I was the victim or that there was no evidence and sour my relationship with Shinobu, I'd apologize straight away. I'd make her see that she really was the only partner for me. Shinobu, I'm sorry, it was my...
Not any of my concern.
She nipped me in the bud, cut off at the best possible moment. I had a pretty good line in mind too.
Thou art constantly flirting and pawing at the girls around thee after all.
You're going to regret this for the rest of your life, Shinobu. You just missed out on the most beautiful dogiza in the world.
I've no interest in seeing my master on his hands and knees while he's in nothing but his underwear. Regardless of how beautiful it may be, 'tis taken me long enough but to answer thy question as to when I first awoke. 'Twas the moment ye shared a kiss with that Tsukumogami girl. Aye, the exact moment. Thy heart was pounding and throbbing, beating as though ye just sprinted with all thy might. And I awoke, alarmed.
'Tis as if my heart had a vibration feature installed in it thanks to our shared senses, Shinobu laughed. Wait, hold on a second. Don't make it sound like I got so impossibly shaken and excited about kissing a tween girl that it was enough to wake you up. She was making me sound so naive and inexperienced.
And so I understand little of the situation. What exactly is going on here? At first glance, the only explanation seems to be that you've kidnapped a young girl and a tween girl, imprisoned them but allow the tween to escape when a kiss provided an opening.
How can you interpret it like that? You've got a filthy mind.
'Tis thy hands that are dirty here.
Anyway, listen. Going any deeper into what just happened with Ononoki would be psychologically taxing, but the bigger issue was learning the true nature of the darkness. Even if Shinobu doesn't know, I'd said to Ononoki, but only as a possibility I couldn't quite rule out. I was pretty sure that she'd know. In which case I wanted to find out as soon as possible. I wanted her to tell me, the darkness, appearing out of nowhere and following us like it was giving chase, it suddenly got ahead and swallowed my cherished bicycle. That darkness... If Ononoki hadn't shoved us off that bicycle, the two of us might have been swallowed up as well. It wasn't difficult to imagine. No, I didn't dare imagine it, and to be frank, it defied my imagination. To begin with, I wasn't certain that the darkness swallowed up my granny bike and caused it to vanish. It's not as though I witnessed the moment. I was just linking the phenomenon of its disappearance, simplistically, with the fact that the darkness was ahead of where my bike was going. I couldn't stop associating the darkness with a black hole, so the bike seemed to have been sucked in, but even that was something I couldn't be sure of. I understood so little of it. During spring break, during Golden Week, with Senjogahara, and Hachikuji, and Kanbaru, and everything else since then, the phenomenon itself was quite clear, like a vampire on the verge of death, or a cat monster on the prowl in town. But this time, I wasn't even clear on the phenomenon itself. Sure, you might remind me that aberrations are fundamentally symbols of what's less than clear, and I'd agree, but couldn't you also say that through them, what's less than clear comes to exist in a clear form? Then the darkness, from the very outset, wasn't consistent with what an aberration should be. It seemed to be a symbol, but of the most heterodox sort. It's not like it's a soot sprite.
Harm? What's that?
Oh, nothing. I definitely wasn't talking about Ghibli movies.
Liar. He just made a reference to my neighbor Totoro. I have to warn thee I'm quite fussy when it comes to Totoro.
I'm begging you, please don't get us off topic. I never thought the day would come when I would be the one making this request.
Huh. I was hoping to do impressions of all the lines, of all the characters.
That'd take an hour and a half.
The real sight would be how the anime adaptation deals with it. The rights issue will be fairly complex.
Don't worry, they're not going to adapt this far into the series. There's just no way. I assure you, unlike the novels, the anime will follow the original plan and end at Nisei.
Excuse me? What a rude thing to say to the leading actress of a feature film.
Misleading actress of a feature film was clearly getting carried away. You didn't get to speak a single line during the anime's first season, did you now?
I can hardly wait. The scene where I stick my hand in my head to search my memories, I cannot wait to see how it unfolds on screen.
Going out of your way to mention a scene that's sure to get cut. And why are you leading with this stuff? Just listen to what I'm trying to tell you.
I refuse, fool. For all of thy usual chattering on with girls, the conversation must move forward without idle talk now that thou hast a topic you wish to discuss. Heaven may forgive such smarm, but not I. The next 150 pages or so shall promote the Kizuich to discuss fed and scent.
I shut her up with a kiss, wrapping my arm around her back and pulling her toward me. I was clearly the instigator, and there was no fudging the picture.
What art thou doing? Air ye Italian, my master?
Just listen. To me. Something bad happened. Actually, I don't even know if it's bad, but please listen. I need your insight.
Well, if thou dost insist.
She reacted bashfully, fidgeting and fiddling with her blonde hair and blushing. It was this kind of thing that made her so cute. She's so naive that you'd never think she's lived for 600 years. Where was her mature and understanding personality from a moment ago?
I shan't refuse to listen. Now talk.
Making it back with you from all of that time travel, I met Hachikuji right after we climbed down the mountain. I felt like I moved the story forward at a fast pace, but the preamble still ended up being pretty long. I glanced at Hachikuji, still sound asleep. If anyone, maybe she was the one pretending to be asleep, and started explaining everything to Shinobu. Telling her about it would let me get the story straight in my own. That is, if there was anything in this tale to get straight.
Tis almost too convenient.
I think it's too early for that line. Anyway, Hachikuji left her backpack in my room yesterday, and she was looking for me in order to get it back. In order to return it, we headed to my house together, in a friendly, so very friendly manner.
Why art thou emphasizing the friendliness?
I wasn't going to tell her that Hachikuji's utterances today betrayed an odd antipathy toward me. I had nothing whatsoever to gain from showing my partner, any more than I already have, just how fragile my heart is. And, well, we didn't run into any trouble in particular up to that point. I was able to return her backpack normally. I handed over to Hachikuji, who waited outside my house, a backpack that hadn't been searched through at all.
Every aspect of thy story exudes remorse. 'Tis as if I'm conversing with a sordid, petty criminal.
Can you not compare your partner to a petty criminal? Wait, how far did I get into the story?
Up to where ye schemed to bring her into thy home somehow.
Right, and just as I was about to break out every trick in the book, nope, I never said anything of the sort. As any older person would for a younger person, I kindly offered to take her out to lunch, to promote her physical development.
Yet a ghost shan't ever develop, and 'twas only fast food.
How was she so sure it was fast food? How was she able to read me so well? Way too sharp of her. And that's when it appeared out of nowhere. Not even I could mix jokes into the story from here on. Suddenly, the darkness appeared near us. Our immediate flight, the chase. How we were saved by Oninoki, who just happened to be passing by, and finally, how we got away from the scene with the disengagement edition of her unlimited rulebook. I eloquently, if I do say so myself, rattled off everything that happened, speeding through to the end. I'd hoped recounting the story would help me get it straight, and as you might expect, I was completely wrong. If anything, the more I talked, the more confused I became. Now that I thought about it, even needing to run away screaming with Hachikuji seemed dubious. Instead of telling a jumbled story to Shinobu, who must still be only half awake, shouldn't I go home and call Senjo Gahara and Hanekawa to apologize? That's how dubious it all started to seem. There we have it, but what do you think? If it doesn't bring anything to mind, it doesn't bring anything to mind, of course. I naturally started sounding deferential by the end. You know, I think I even felt a little embarrassed. Yet despite my almost servile attitude, Shinobu met me with a serious look. There wasn't a hint of her trademark gruesome smile. Actually, the more she heard my story, the more I spoke about the darkness, the more her expression turned grim. She looked like she was enjoying my story at first, but by the time I got to the end, she almost seemed mad at me. Could she have been thinking, "What a tedious account you've forced upon my ears, brat? 'Tis a vulgar ghost story, no tale of an aberration. I mean, I guess I'd get mad too if someone woke me up while I was sleeping to tell me about some weird hallucination that wasn't particularly harmful."
What a tedious account you've forced upon my ears, brat.
Then, as I was thinking so, she spoke the exact line I thought she might, but the nuance was a little different than expected. Pretty different, in fact.
Dashiv reminded me of something unpleasant. No, I am merely venting. The responsibility lies not with thee. If anything, this is my fate. Or perhaps my karma, then the one it was after was...
Shinobu mumbled on, not making any sense. She looked lost in thought, or rather like she was trying to remember something. If it were still available to her, she might have used that mnemonic technique of hers, and stuck a hand in her head and rummaged around her brain. What, Shinobu? So you have some idea what it is?
Some idea. I do. Nay, I am uncertain as to whether I can say that I do.
Indecisive words rare for Shinobu, whose stock in trade was speaking directly to the point of having a declaration habit. Then again, recently, during our time travel, she sometimes did show a similar indecisive attitude, but we're talking different cases here. This time, all she'd done was sleep in my shadows. What's the matter, Shinobu? We promised not to keep secrets from each other, remember? If you know something, then tell me. It means you have an idea if you're acting that way. Right? You must know what this thing that I'm calling the darkness really is. What kind of aberration it is. You must know. I ended up hounding her with my questions, but neither surprised nor intimidated by my vehemence. She said, well, maintaining her ambiguous demeanor, if thy question is whether I know, then I suppose I do. Some part of Shinobu's attitude, however, still felt like anger, wrath. At first, I'd thought she was mad at me, but that wasn't it. She seemed to be irritated by something more undefined.
Sk. What a bother. Thinking upon what is to come makes me not but melancholic. Why must I encounter this trouble after? And I say this without exaggeration, saving the world. But this too must be my lot. But this too must be my lot.
Like I was saying, Shinobu...
I know not.
Her expression clearing at a moment's notice, as if she'd taken all of the threads of emotion tangled around in her, and snipped them loose at once, she turned toward me and spoke those words. Quite the opposite of what she'd said earlier. What? But, you just told me that if the question is whether you know, you do.
I mean, I've no clue what kind of aberration it is.
Huh?
As you've half noticed thyself, this darkness is no aberration. The Hawaiian-shirted boy would likely say the same. That 'tis no aberration, that 'tis not on the order of a mere aberration.
Well, yeah, maybe Shinobu's answer wasn't that surprising. I myself had wondered if the darkness really was an aberration. I thought it could be something else, a different kind of phenomena. So it wasn't anything to be surprised by. It wasn't, but it certainly didn't mean I could go, I see. What a relief, case closed. To begin with, the way Shinobu put it was weird for her, the king of aberrations. to say that it wasn't on the order of a mere aberrations?
My goodness, what a hassle. Nay, I'm appalled. That absurd phenomenon had yet to end.
Yet to end? What do you mean, had yet?
That phenomenon has no name.
No room for argument. Whether she was finally reclaiming her mojo or just finally waking up, she said it with no room for argument. A declaration.
It, which ye term the darkness, is something I have seen in the past, and that is what I've recalled.
Recalled. You did say you were reminded of something unpleasant, but by past, how long ago do you mean?
400 years, mayhap?
400 years? 400 years? Isn't that when…
Indeed.
Soberly, solemnly, putting aside the assertive tone, such an expression was extremely rare on her.
When I last visited this land, in other words, when I created my first thrall.
Back then. I was caught up in that darkness, Shinobu said.
Nay, I suppose I should say swallowed up.
Swallowed up.
Shamefully enough.
I was young then, she explained, despite looking like a little girl.
I feel no nostalgia at all, nor the desire to speak of this, but under the circumstances I suppose that is not an option. Now that it has appeared, doing naught about it could, in the worst case, bring ruin to the entire town.
To… town… And so they began. Shinobu Oshino scratched that. The iron-blooded, hot-blooded, yet cold-blooded vampire. Kisat Aceralorian Heartunderblade's recollections, from 400 years ago. Like it was better late than never.
Now then, 'tis been quite some time since I've last thought of those days. Once one reaches my age, new memories are a rarity. To say that I live only in the moment would be a nice-sounding way to put it, but really 'tis a transient, hedonistic existence. I remember only that which I enjoyed and forget that which was unpleasant. And so I cannot deny this unpleasant feeling, for I've suddenly been reminded of something forgotten from my past that I hardly wanted to remember. That said, I've no intention at all of blaming thee, so thou may rest easy in that sense. How should I put this? This time around, thou art, in a rare turn for thee, an entirely innocent bystander. 'Twas not a case of ye sticking thine own head into a situation, though I'm sure thou will make off for the jaws of death as always, once ye hear my story, and I suppose I will be there with thee. This story will be a bit of a long one. It will require spending the great majority of the pages I'd planned to use advertising my theatrical film, at the very least. What's that? It doesn't bother thee in the slightest. What cold words? Just as my moment in the spotlight had come after all this time. But I suppose I do have memories of most of what happened that spring break. Of course that memory came to a proper conclusion, thanks to that wretched Hawaiian-shirted boy. A bad ending, though it may have been. But in those days, I never would have been defeated by such a child anyways. I was at my zenith in those times after all. Not a child as I am now, not looking like the kind of Lolita preferred by thee. Not flat and smooth, but big and buxom Kisat Aceralorian Heart Underblade, the iron-blooded, hot-blooded, yet cold-blooded, yet cold-blooded, yet cold-blooded, yet cold-blooded vampire. The king of aberrations, bound by none, bound by no shadow, one who lived as she pleased. Suicidal? Oh no, I became a suicidal vampire after that. I'm impressed that you managed to remember such an early character trait of mine. This is why talking about the past always embarrasses me so. Still, strictly speaking, this will not be the first time I've spoken to thee about those days. I should have once told thee about the time I created my first thrall. Brief as the discussion was, during spring break on the roof of this building. Though I never spoke of the circumstances around it. In other words, this was the same time I acquired the enchanted blade Kokorawatari, the one I've let thee borrow so many times. I will have to give a bit of a preface, or perhaps a few warnings before I begin. I'm about to tell thee the story of my first thrall. The story of when I created this first thrall. So take care not to grow jealous. No, 'twas not a joke, and 'tis no laughing matter not to me. I suppose 'tis rare to find a vampire as chaste as I, but to create a thrall is, basically, to have one's breed flourish. One could say it is like creating family. While it may not have been a complicated, convoluted relationship such as ours, someone all but unrelated to thee having a master and servant relationship with myself, even temporarily, cannot but be an unpleasant story for thee. Or perhaps I merely wish you would feel that way. 'Tis something a bit different in nature from the way you cheated on me by kissing that little Tsukumogami girl earlier, for I was, for what 'tis worth, serious about it. I felt about as serious then as I did when I made thee my thrall. Perhaps we could say I was more serious, as I made thee my thrall with the intention of turning thee back into a human. At the very least, 'twas not a frivolous act. So listen, do feel properly jealous. To word it in plain terms, from thy perspective now, this thrall would be an ex-boyfriend of mine, sorry as I must be to disavow my virginity to thee. Well, no, that one was a joke. I know that the trust between us will not be shaken by my retelling, my rehashing of my past, not after all this time. So my true warning to thee is to listen closely, for this is no mere story of times past. 'Tis indeed a tale that still applies, that connects to this moment. 400 years, so the better part of my life, then it all went by so fast, like the blink of an eye. My memories are hazy. I'd forgotten them completely until just a moment ago, after all. Now, what should I start with? Rather, where should I begin? Perhaps I'll begin with the circumstances that led to my visiting this land. Japan, of course, it may not have been called by that name in those days. Oh, ye must know, the official name Japan only came into existence a few dozen years ago, no? Prior to that was the Empire of Japan. What was it before that? Ye must know, thou art studying for thine existed prior to that. I don't quite understand. The land of the rising sun, its derivation. But in any case, I didn't know any better at the time, even less than now. I didn't know for better or for worse. I didn't know a thing about human culture or the like. Why, forget any name, I did not even know that these islands existed here. I dove expecting to take a dip in the ocean, only to find land there. What a surprise it was. A dip in the ocean? Vampires can't cross the sea? They can't pass over running water? Well, I wouldn't know what to say to such common sense. Having held my power and fought me, thou ought to know better than anyone that I am a special rare species of vampire to which such rules do not apply. Not to mention that I was at my zenith then, in high bloom. In high bloom and in new bloom. Of course vampires are still vampires. I do have those things you would call vulnerabilities, such as being weak to the sun, or to garlic or crosses or what have you, my properly established rules and characteristics. But in those days I had regenerative abilities that far outstripped these weaknesses. From the moment the sun began turning my body to ash, nay, before it even could, my body regenerated. If myself of yore were to be biologically anatomized, I suppose I was an abnormally regenerative vampire. Even poison, which has troubled thee a number of times, would have done nothing to me in those days. My functions would have regenerated from the moment, or even before the poison took effect. Prior to my visit, I was at the South Pole. Aye, the South Pole. I wanted to see the aurora, like I said already. I was not suicidal then, merely a traveler. I was visiting the sights of the world. Even as vampire hunters around the globe sought to take my life, no, the hunters of those days were no mere dramaturgies or episodes or guillotine cutters. They would absolutely disgust you. Human rights and such weren't given consideration in those days. How the human world has changed in a mere 400 years. Thy life would be hunted in those days simply for being immortal, even if thou were not a vampire. Not that I gave any mind to it, I enjoyed it. In fact, 'twould not be until a little later that I began to tire of such battles, that I developed a distaste for them, that I became serious when I say that I was simply, innocently, and purely enjoying my travels in those days. Oh, the aurora was gorgeous. 'Tis amazing, that aurora. Ye ought to see it once while thou art alive. Well, I understand humanity is busy these days with global warming or whatever 'tis called, but I'm sure another ice age will come about eventually. It should be visible in Japan then. So don't ye forget to watch, if ye can live that long, that is. Ye seem to be bound for an early death. But, to jump to the conclusion, 'twas a mistake. However much of an untrammeled traveler I wished to be, however much I wanted to see the aurora, the South Pole was the one place I should have never gone indeed. The North Pole too. No, 'tis not as if I particularly dislike the cold. You could even say cold climes are my forte as a vampire, and being immortal also means having no body temperature. 'Twould get a bit complicated if I began down that path, as I'd need to explain the relation to zombies and ghosts and the like. Nay, the problem is that there are no humans at the South Pole. 'Tis what ye might call an uninhabited island. I have heard that, technically speaking, the North Pole is not land, but floating ice. But thou must understand this well. Aberrations stand in conflict with humans, but they cannot come into existence without humans. Tales of aberrations cannot come to be without eyewitness testimony or first-hand experience. 'Tis not as if penguins and polar bears would speak of my immortality or my monstrosity, no matter how I exhibited them. Urban legends, the word on the street, second-hand gossip, without humans none would exist. While I may not have frozen to death, I suppose I felt my existence weakening. Ah, 'tis no good, what a crisis I found myself in. 'Twas no time to be looking at the aurora, for I may soon become Aurora. For I may soon become Aurora myself. Nay, I meant nothing by that. There are no romantic legends that say a vampire turns to Aurora when she dies. There do seem to be some that state the aurora consists of the souls of the dead, but even that legend had no speaker for it at the South Pole. There are now humans at the South Pole, Antarctic research expeditions, ye say? Ah, so I was their herald. Not that I discovered or researched a thing. Regardless, I thought that unless I did something, the great being known as myself would vanish into thin air. What a loss for the world. I must not die until I have vanquished the sun, and so I escaped the South Pole in a tizzy. I escaped with a super jump instant air dash. Even I had to bend my knees and crouch prior to taking off. The Tsukumogami girl's jump. Ah, I suppose ye did speak of such things. The disengagement edition of her unlimited rulebook. 'Twouldn't even merit comparison. To be clear with thee here, the recoil from my jump threatened to destroy the Antarctic landmass. I took care not to, of course. While I may not have wanted to stay there, 'twas a pleasant land. My plan was to make it a vacation home, a place where I could sequester myself at times when I wished to avoid humans. Meanwhile, I had not given any thought at all to where I might land. It was a random haphazard jump, and so I thought I would land in the ocean anyway. My idea was to then take a little swim and refresh myself. 3/4 of the world is ocean, so probability would state that I was most likely to land in it, no? And while I said the jump was a haphazard one, I did have some kind of a target. I aimed for somewhere around the Pacific. But, much to my surprise, there was this country. What's that look on thy face? No, there's no need for worry. 'Tis not as if I crushed this nation underfoot. Perhaps I would have in the case of a solid landing, but that is where my good luck stepped in. I fell in a lake, though it vanished when I did. The scale is needlessly grand, ye say. Again, this is a story of me at my zenith, but true, you've barely seen me at the height of my powers. And that first impression was particularly bad. Ye see, the scale I fundamentally operate on is grand. But the lake, when I landed in its waters, no. Since I ended up with both feet on its bed, I suppose I ought to say that I landed on land. After all, I made the lake disappear, and that is where the tale begins. This worthless tale of a demon. Well, I can't help the lack of excitement in my voice because I already know the ending to this tale, which is to say, 'tis already evident to me that it will come to an awful conclusion. But while I call it a worthless tale, 'tis by no means an entirely unpleasant memory, a flashback I wish to recall none of. As you can see, I've a careless personality. Careless, or perhaps perfunctory, or perhaps improvinctory, but in any case, I've lived my life from moment to moment, not thinking about matters too deeply. That must be why I've lived notably long for a vampire, because I've lived it as hedonistically as I could, never giving too much thought to anything, which is why I do have my reasonably pleasant memories as well of what happened in that village. I've forgotten its name, though. Nay, this isn't something I've forgotten. I never made the effort to remember it to begin with. As thou art well aware, I once had close to no interest in human society as a vampire. All of it looked identical to me, and I made no effort to distinguish any of it from the rest. I could barely distinguish one race from another. What are the humans in this country? They're all so tiny in size. That was about the only thought I had. A well-grown boy is no uncommon sight now, but 400 years ago, every one of thee was about thy height. But well, I am the tiny one now. One never knows what the world may bring. In any case, I apologize for making the story complicated, but the names of villages and humans and all those other kinds of proper nouns won't be accurate going forward. In fact, I shan't even try. As my senses direct me, they won't even be guesses. 'Twould not necessarily be incorrect to call them nonsense, for about the only distinctions I was making were village, man, woman, and child. I may have even mixed those, all in a messy tangle. I presume the lake whose disappearance I caused had some sort of name as well, but is not one I remember, though 'twas a rather large pond. Now that I think of it, I recall that annoying Hawaiian-shirted boy speaking of legends stating that your lake was made by the footprints of an inhuman existence, but the opposite would hold true in my case, for my footprints caused the lake to vanish. That said, 'tis not as though I did it without any tricks. Or perhaps not tricks, but there are always what thou might call advantageous conditions on my side whenever I perform any such large-scale acts. It seems the lake lacked much of its water in those days. Aye, from a drought. 'Twas an age with no dams or the like, so the damage dealt by global warming, or rather, long droughts, was quite serious. To the point where it truly was a matter of life and death. It may be hard for one such as thee who lives in a blessed age to understand. But this was a time when the very concept of infrastructure did not exist. But while it may nearly sound as though I feel sorry for the humans back then, I of course had no such conception at the time. While I say that aberrations cannot exist without humans, that aberrations only come into being as such when they are first witnessed by humans, all of that is but theory speaking. To go further, 'tis not more than an empty idea. Why would I ever give my thanks or show my gratitude? In fact, I cackled and joked that if the sun's rays were causing them to grow weak and die, then why 'twas nearly as though they were vampires. 'Twas dark comedy, of course. But by chance I had saved those helpless humans. How, ye ask? I thought I'd explained that already. I said I'd made the lake disappear, did I not? But 'tis not as if I'm an explosive, and I spoke of how I have no body temperature. I would not say I have none whatsoever, due to my remarkable regenerative abilities, but let us put that aside. This is to say that no matter the speed, Mach whatever, at which I landed, I may have made the lake run dry, but 'tis not as though its water would vanish. 'Twould not evaporate, ye see? True, the high speeds may have heated me to some degree, but I regenerate from even such hot temperatures back to a regular one when I land. Whether on water or land, my body temperature must be quite pedestrian. Let us ignore the unpedestrian notion of landing there from the South Pole in the first place. And with that ignored, what dost thou think would happen then? Think of it as a stone having dropped into a deep puddle from directly above. Nay, there's no need to give it any special thought. Just think about it normally. The water would splash up. Nearly all the water in the lake. While I may have been able to negate my heat, I could not go so far as to negate my kinetic energy now. As for what happened to the water that flew into the air, that too was something utterly regular. After dancing in the sky for a moment, it followed the law of gravity and fell back down to the ground. As rain? Nay, the word will suffice if water comes down from the sky. 'Tis rain? Dost thou expect me to be able to speak on the mechanisms of weather phenomena anyway? 'Tis not as though I know everything merely because I've lived for a long time. Expect not the wisdom of the wizened for me. I told thee I've lived my life in the moment. In any case, I made it rain. And here's the funny part, in those days to do so was nearly the most virtuous act any being could perform. Thou must be thinking, what's so impressive about making it rain? Or at least thou must not understand why doing so is such a virtuous act. So I shall be kind and rephrase what I did in a single word. 'Twas a miracle. The age was one where men staked their lives on praying for rain. They did not need me to split the land in two, for a long drought was damaging enough to do just that on its own. I do think that the sun has mellowed since those days, though it depends from place to place. In any case, I want thee to understand the era's historical background. And it was in this time, and these conditions of this land, that I made it rain. 'Twas only as a result, but I saved not just many lives, but entire hamlets all around the lake, far and wide. I mean, not to boast, I have no interest in bragging. 'Twas not my intention, after all. I do not consider saving a human life as any great deed either, and one false step would have turned the miracle into a disaster. Had I landed in a place away from the lake, the center of a village, for example, I may have kicked up not the water of a lake, but the drought-cracked land itself. While I would not go so far as to say that I'd have flipped these islands upside down, a number of towns would have met such a fated disaster. That is in part why I aimed for the sea when I leapt. While 'tis true that I generally have no interest whatsoever in human culture or life, 'tis not as if I take pleasure in massacring them on a large scale. Of course I'd want to avoid doing so if I could. But if I couldn't, I wouldn't. I am an aberration, after all. And a vampire. One of a degenerate tribe where suicide and the slaying of kin are chronic issues. Humans had different ethics in those days compared to now, and I would say that perhaps mine are different as well. Maintaining the same character for 400 years is an impossible task, especially in my case. I can now show some bit of understanding when it comes to humans by way of the strong influence you've had on me. But in those days, I'm sure this is rather unpleasant for thee to hear, a modern man and one closer to the human side, but 'tis the truth. What I'm trying to say is that I did not upend the water in the lake to become any savior of the villages around it. Allow me to state that much. There would be no point at all in telling the legend of a savior rather than of a vampire. And anyway, while I said I'd prefer to avoid mass death if possible, I failed to do just that in reality. The lake only happened to be there, and in a stroke of bad timing, I was witness when it happened to happen. Nay, perhaps I ought to call it good timing. I mean, I'd executed that super jump instant air dash from the South Pole in search of witnesses of the aberration that is myself. In fact, this prompt witnessing would be a resounding success. I ought to give a hip hip hooray for having been witnessed, and of all the times, in the instant I caused that miracle. Nay, I suppose it really was poor timing when I think of what came after. The worst timing, by the by. Dost thou know what ye humans call one who performed a miracle? What one, whether aberration or human, is called upon performing a miracle? Thou must have an idea. The performer of a miracle is called God. To be more precise, the performer, whether aberration or human, is made into a god.
Made into a god? I couldn't help but be puzzled by Shinobu's words for one thing. What she was saying sounded so overblown. And for another thing, her story seemed pretty disconnected from the issue at hand, namely that darkness.
What, do I sound foolish to thee?
Well. She rattled me by being exactly right. I felt like I needed to learn how to hide my emotions a little better, though becoming as inexpressive as Ononoki would be too extreme. It was way too easy for people to see them. You didn't have to be Ashino to see through me. Well, yes. Oh, but didn't you tell me once about being invited to become a god in the past or something? I felt like she said it during spring break, right after I met her, right after she made me into a vampire. Told that I wanted to turn back into a human. She said she understood how I felt. Since she was once invited to become a god but declined, she understood how I felt, and so she'd make me human again. Is this the time you were talking about?
Well, I suppose, but recalling it now, I wasn't invited to become one. In fact, as much as I was half-forced, there was no room for dialogue or anything of the like.
No room for dialogue. I guess you did make it rain right in front of their eyes. As in, seeing is believing. But wait, dialogue? Before we go any further, Shinobu, there's something I want to confirm. Were you able to speak Japanese back then? In other words, when you saved these villagers, were you able to have a proper conversation with the Japanese people who witnessed you? Or rather, were you able to communicate your thoughts to them at all?
Nay, I was not.
Didn't think so? So that was why. There could never be a dialogue in the first place. Shinobu didn't even know about the existence of Japan, so of course, she didn't know Japanese. So is that when you learned Japanese or something?
Clumsily of course, I was a bright girl in my glory days, and a multitude venerated me as a god. It didn't take a terribly long time to learn the language spoken by those humans.
Is that really how it works?
And even now, I'm learning modern language from my kind. Mo and Sundier and braided big booby class president.
You need to forget the last one you just said. I didn't remember ever teaching her that phrase. Don't say it to Hanekawa even by accident. She doesn't have braids anymore, anyway. I love her no matter what her hairstyle is, though. But being half-forced into becoming a god doesn't seem like your style. Why not just escape from that with a super jump instant air dash?
Run? Me?
I couldn't begin to figure out how she was able to look at her own partner with such an awful expression on her face.
I turn my back to no one. I've never once fled since the day I was born as a vampire.
I don't know, it felt like she had a lot of times. And wait, wasn't she originally born as a human before turning into a vampire? Or maybe she didn't remember that either. What a convenient memory she had. That's what happens when you live for so long.
Well, 'tis not as if they had any need to court me by force, nor did I have any reason to reject them by force. I thought 'twould be a nice change of pace to be treated as a god, I suppose, to imagine my mental state at the time.
Still, treated as a god. Just like Shinobu said, I didn't really understand the historical background or circumstances, so I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. Was my point of view too peaceful? I guess I can understand how making it rain was the most virtuous miracle possible in those days, but that seems like something other aberrations could do too. Like, rain frogs?
Rain frogs aren't aberrations, but when they saw rainfall so intense that it caused flooding, they must have treated that as an aberration. Everything is situational in the end.
Situational, huh? Oh, but now that you mention it, I remember hearing that they can control the weather to some degree now. That they can force the sky to be clear or cloudy or rainy by moving rain clouds around with planes or something. It's not quite genetic engineering, but it does feel like technology that's gone beyond the boundaries of humankind in some way. Maybe you could call that the other side of the miracle coin.
Indeed, if someone appeared who could use genetic engineering to cure any illness in an instant, who would object to calling her a god? She would even be venerated, though whether that's a good thing or not, I do not know. I mean to say that deicide is not out of the question in this day and age of weakened piety. Those with outstanding skills are targeted for their skills and their life, but no deicide itself has existed in places around the world for millennia. Fortunately, that was not my experience.
Oh, it wasn't? That was unexpected. Since she said the story had a bad outcome, I assumed she was working up to that kind of ending, but then, in that case, there wouldn't be any place for the darkness in her story. So far, I didn't have any clue when or at what point the darkness might get involved.
What? Are ye disappointed? That my plight in those days was not that I fell victim to deicide? This audience of mine has such cruel expectations.
No, that's not what I meant.
Ye needn't worry, this story will be relevant. 'Tis not my plan at all to stealthily turn this into an advertisement for the film.
Are you sure it isn't?
Why, I cannot believe it. I'd heard that it would be a theatrical feature but never expected it to be in 3D.
Stop spreading false information. It's 2D. Okay, 2D. What was she doing trying to use lies to get viewers in seats?
To think the class president's breasts would come bounding out so?
They won't. They won't.
Well, putting aside whether they will, a film would be subject to fewer restrictions than television, so will we not be able to depict whatever we want, be it breasts or blood spray?
I now knew this little girl talked about breasts and blood spray in the same breath. Very scary. Hold on. So stop sneaking in ads for the movie. Keep telling the story. About your past or your first thrall. And about the darkness, of course, but if I'm being honest with you, I was interested in her first thrall too. Having it described as jealousy or envy, which made me feel like I'd been seen through, didn't sit well with me. But as Shinobu's know, as Kisat Asaralori and Hard Underblade's second thrall, I couldn't help but be curious, I just had to be.
You needn't tell me to continue, but I am recalling some of this as I tell it, so like anything from the past, my memories are a bit hazy, and I may not remember the precise details.
How undependable. Please, Shinobu. I'm depending on you.
Allow me to continue by explaining a bit more about the background, though this would have more to do with the conditions of the land than it does the age.
The conditions of the land? You mean how the whole area was suffering from a drought, right? I got that already.
Nay, not that, but details of the lake I made disappear. It seemed that this lake, while perhaps not Lake Baiwa, had been worshipped in one way or another. Those who lived around it revered it as a divine lake, and prayed to it as such. In other words, they prayed to it for rain. I would seem easy to laugh at them for their foolishness, however many myriad gods they say this country has, seeing a lake of all things as a god and praying to it for rain. If thou art willing to go that far, why not scoop the water from the lake and carry it back with thee bucket by bucket?
Actually, if she made a lake that people worship disappear, didn't that make her the god killer? I wasn't going to make the joke, though.
Thus my witnesses were locals praying for rain to that bunch. It must have seemed as though I'd come bursting out from inside the lake, as an incarnation of the lake's water.
It's a little awkward to say this, but if someone that blonde, golden-eyed, and tall appeared out of nowhere in front of a Japanese person in those days, she'd seem pretty divine. Of course, she was doomful, not divine. Then again, maybe there isn't that much of a difference in impression given off by the two words. Even I was taken by her beauty when I witnessed her for the first time, so much so that I was ready to throw my life away. In that sense, maybe there isn't any difference between aberrations and gods. Even the crab that had possessed Senjogahara was supposed to be a kind of god. As for devils, which stood in contrast, would Kambara's monkey be one? But even that devil was a monkey that granted wishes, and you could say that it performed miracles. Was there or wasn't there some theory that gods and devils are just two sides of the same coin?
Flattery will get thee nothing.
I wasn't trying to flatter you or suck up to you. Anyone from outside of Japan would have been a rare sight in those days.
Did you not hear what I just said about flattery? Yea, truly are a fool. The most it could possibly get thee is a pole dance.
That'd be something. She didn't simply not mind my words, she was jubilant. A god who's vulnerable to praise wasn't one I'd worship. Still, she'd performed a miracle before their eyes, manifesting as a god to them, and she'd saved many of their lives as a result, if they were saved. I could understand those people making Shinobu into a god, but that couldn't have lasted for long.
Why dost thou say so?
Well, given your personality, you're not the type to sit back and enjoy people just worshipping you. She was haughty and arrogant, domineering and condescending, discriminatory and egotistical, someone so hopeless that she really left you with no hope that there was no way this vampire could enjoy being treated as a god for long was my take on it. Speaking of living only in the moment, she might rise to that position on a lark, but I couldn't see her having any interest in ruling or reigning, given her personality. It goes without saying, though, that the Shinobu that I knew, the one I was so close to, had a personality deeply influenced by none other than my own. So of course I'd think that, but I had no way of knowing her personality back then, and yet if she was the type to accept being treated as a god, she'd have made more than just 2 thralls over the course of 600 years. She'd have formed a hierarchical society of vampires. In general, she preferred solitude over supremacy, and I dare say that she placed herself somewhere above a god in her own mind. It was that incredible pride of hers that made me think she wouldn't decide to be a mere god for long, being a demon. That's the one thing this vampire would never let go of.
Indeed. That is the kind of prideful creature I am. I seek no admiration from others at all. Such vanity has no place in my life. Thou art wise, I see.
Considering how hopelessly weak she was to praise, maybe it'd be better to retract my previous statement.
Well, true. As you say, my time as a god did not last long, roughly a year, I reckon. Putting anything about my personality aside, it seems that I truly was not made to be a god.
Shinobu looked out the window when she said this. The sky was still blue. No signs anywhere of aberrations or anything suspicious. As for Mayoi Hachikuji, she was still to our side, unconscious.
I suppose you could say that part of the reason I went along with those fools' attempts to exalt me as a god was to take a break. Living at the South Pole was demanding. Bitter frozen blizzards along with those many days when I was never once recognized as an aberration. While I may have been at my zenith, I was just the littlest bit tired. The littlest bit tired. So now that I was in a place with plenty of humans that would recognize me, I thought I would take it easy and rest. Call it a whim if you want. A whim quite befitting of me being treated as a god meant free lodgings and food. 'Twas a holiday of sorts. I was on an island nation after all, like being on Hawaii, were I to give a modern comparison. Hawaii, though that is one place I've never been despite having traveled the world. 'Tis not easy to arrive on an island nation with a super jump. Hitting one's mark is difficult unless 'tis a large continent. Oh no. When I said free food, I wasn't sucking the locals' blood. Don't look at me like that. I am a vampire and an aberration that uses human blood as energy, but I'd not consume any from humans, showing me affection. Though it's hard to say what I'd do in an emergency. What about thee? Say there was a cow that showed the affection in one that didn't. Thou would consume the latter's meat, would thou not? 'Tis the same thing. This country did still have a system of sacrifice in those days, so blood would have been easy to procure no matter how much I wanted for thy reference. I've heard that ritual human sacrifices extended here until quite recently too. From who? That Hawaiian-shirted boy. Though I never told him this story not once during the days I spent in these ruins with my arms around my legs, did it feel appropriate to speak of my past. Of course, this is that boy we're talking about. He'd come to this town having researched everything he could about me, so perhaps he knew without any disclosure on my part. Though I'm dubious of whether any records of those villages still exist, most of what makes me a legendary vampire are my acts in Europe, and not a person survived who could have related the event that happened here. That is what awaits us at the end of this story. Brace thyself. Every character that appears will die. While they avoided dying of drought, they all died anyway. Perhaps destiny isn't that easily twisted of a thing in the end, though I'd prefer not to believe so. Well, I had no such values at the time, but ye'd better not misunderstand. I was not merely enjoying a vacation on an island nation in the Far East. I did my job as a god too. Making it rain, but once was not enough, I would wait a bit and then make it rain again. What's that? Didn't the lake disappear? Which is why I gathered rain clouds from the area. 'Tis the method ye just described. I used no airplane or the like, of course. I collected them with my own hands. Hold on, don't tell me you forgot I can sprout wings. True, 'twould only cause other regions to suffer through drought, so I tried as best I could to gather them from above the sea. But I doubt my work was perfect. Gods are self-centered in that sense, believe and ye shall be saved, they say, and proceed to save only those who do. I did, of course, explain this to those humans, but they did not seem to particularly mind. In other words, they were faithful in appearance alone, and were in the end a regular bunch that thought only about themselves. While I don't dislike selfishness in humans, I wonder, dost thou find it a bit difficult to accept dislike Shutter Seth? Indeed, the karma of humans, or rather of all living things, would be much easier to bear if he simply became an aberration. Or a god. Of course, 'twas not a decision thou or I had the opportunity to make. Right. I'll skip over a bit. Shall we pick up the pace? Telling thee of how those humans came to venerate me could turn into not more than boasting if I am not careful about how I was extolled in this way and respected in that way. 'Twould be a dull story to hear, would it not? Not that this will be an entertaining story. Not a thing about this story is entertaining, unless 'tis the utter farce that was my youthful folly. Laugh if you want to, he won't be able for long. So, while I spoke earlier of free lodgings, in fact I made them myself, in the bed of the lake that disappeared, the lake itself had been recognized as my land, as what ye might call my holy ground. It became home to my shrine. 'Twas a gorgeous structure. 'Tis not as if I could have settled in a village and lived among humans. After all, how would I have been able to maintain my divine majesty? What's that? I'm a horrible god for demanding a shrine from such a destitute village. Do not misunderstand. No one built anything for my sake. I built it myself. Have ye forgotten my ability to realize matter? And this was at my zenith. I was able to create a building and any sort of incidental gasp at such speed. It did not so much as tire me. In the time it took them to gasp at such speed, it did not so much as tire me. I must say, though, ye truly are an awful sight there in your underwear and naught else. I'll make thee clothes, so just wear them. How long dost thou plan on providing fan service to that muscle-obsessed Tsukumogami girl? I like it. Aye, it suits thee. Wear that in the theatrical anime? What's that? 'Twould throw the timeline off? What do I care? Time is meaningless in my presence. Did thou not learn that for thyself just the other day? Ignoring the timeline is but a small price to pay, if the alternative is putting thy unfortunate casual attire on the silver screen for all to see. Aye, ye disappoint. In any case, I built my pleasant home on the bed of the lake, but this too was considered a miracle, only bolstering my godhood. It positively skyrocketed. I let them do as they pleased. A bunch that showed no interest in the logic of an occurrence and instead preferred to proclaim and hail a miracle was best left alone. There was no need to go out of my way to educate them. I commend thee in that sense for attempting to discover what the darkness truly is in this way. I can see that the Hawaiian-shirted boy educated thee well, or perhaps enhanced thee, but that said, the logic of the thing cannot always be understood. For even I, doing this explaining to thee, know not the identity of that darkness. I am merely trying to explain how I do not understand what has not lent itself to understanding. 'Tis forlorn to reflect upon. In that regard, this is no different from the idle chatter ye always engage in with all the girls. Shall we put this to an end? Skip straight to the conclusion, and I jest. I jest. Even I would feel uncomfortable saying this much and dropping it. I shall continue, with a perhaps meaningless story. While I said I let them do as they pleased, I did forbid that lot, or rather my adherents, from doing one thing. Naming me. Calling me by a name. That is what I forbade. As I already said, I do not remember any proper nouns, will not call people by their names, and do not so much as know the name of that village, since I saw no value in them. They, as a whole, were naught but humans. A single bunch of humans. But I did not allow them to call me by name for a different reason after all. I was a god. That lot wanted to know my name. Yet I did not allow them to, never did I allow them to call me by my given name, Kisot, my alias Acer Alorian, my heritage, Hard Underblade. I never gave them my name to begin with, of course. And I did not allow them to give me one, either. When that Hawaiian-shirted boy named Shinobu Ashino, 'twas to chain my existence by the name bound, hand and foot, and this was the one thing I had to avoid in those days. For if I were given a name, I would be chained to that land, while for me the title of god was but temporary, my time in that land but a vacation. Why should I allow myself to be chained? I may have acted like a god, but I had no intention at all of becoming one. I suppose I learned not the names of those people or the village for the same reason, if thou were to look at it that way, because to call them by their names would breed affection. I may no longer be able to leave that land, but all of this is said in retrospect, and I had no such distinct awareness of the reason in those days. Now that I think upon it, I continue to remember few proper nouns. I feel the only full names I recall with clarity belong to thee and thy sisters. If thou were to ask me to write it in thy system of characters, I am dubious of even thy name. The difference of a few small lines here and there can alter pronunciations and meanings so drastically, changing Koyomi, calendar, into Reki, record. Stop it. Don't act so mad, or rather, don't act so despondent. For I doubt ye can spell my former name correctly, but in any case, with the exception of calling me by a name, I permitted them everything. Not so much permitted, I simply let them be. I idly spent my time as I wished, and blessed the occasional wedding. Ye could call it pleasant. Looking back on it, I am dissatisfied in that Mr. Donut had yet to come to this country, but that aside, 'twas a nice vacation for the most part. A way to kill time, or rather, I savored all the time I had to spare. As much as I wanted to my heart's content, I calmly and rather peacefully waited to recover from the small bit of fatigue I had to recover from the small bit of fatigue. My regenerative powers are, strictly speaking, different from powers of recovery still. I'd assumed that the strength of my existence would recover if those people continued to witness me, but unfortunately 'twas not how things work in the real world. How could it recover when they were not witnessing me as an aberration known as a vampire? It took quite some time for me to notice this. My recovery seems to be progressing at a terribly slow pace, I thought, as I lived my leisurely life. And at the time, in fact, I had no reason to be bothered by it. Say I'd continued to go unwitnessed by nobody while I did take care to move so that I would be, say I had continued to live there at the South Pole. I think I would have survived for another century. In fact, looking back on it, that is what I should have done. I'd overreacted and in my haste made escaping the South Pole my only priority. Thanks to my doing so, I was able to live a pleasant life as a god. Or so I thought, but 'twas not the case. I was utterly mistaken. 'Twould have been quite all right not to be witnessed as a vampire. That was not the pressing issue. The issue was that I was continuing to be witnessed as a god in retrospect. Simply refusing to be called by a name was not enough. Dance with the devil and ye two will become one, and so be called a god and ye two will become one. I was truly amiss not to notice, nay, not even know this. But let us put that aside. Judging by the history textbooks ye now study, the political structure in those days was known as the Bakuhan system, but I am not terribly familiar with that sort of thing. They must have been ruled by something somewhere as they went off to wherever they went to offer tribute each year, though serving something other than their god strikes me as unfaithful when I think upon it. Well, it seems that times have not changed much since then. Who sits at the top of a country has only a limited bearing on those at the bottom. Perhaps it was a difficult time, but they did all seem to enjoy themselves. They seem to live happy lives. Humans are capable of finding joy in even the worst of conditions, and perhaps they can find misery in the best. That's how they differ from aberrations, who have more defined characters. Nay, my character had been wavering at the time. When I think upon it now, I ought to have refused their treating me as a god and left the moment I learned the land had no legends of vampires. One could put it in more simple terms, too, that I was punished for daring to act like a god for so long, at least. That's what he said. Him, my first thrall. In other words, he who possessed the enchanted blade Kokoro-atari. I spoke the slightest bit about that man before. What did I say about him then? That he was a warrior? A samurai? Aye, that was it. But if we're to speak of the historical background, this land seems to have had the most peaceful political system in the world in those days. Though this is something I learned not from my textbook, but from that Hawaiian-shirted boy. At any rate, 'twas an age when those who fought had the least to do. He and I were alike in that sense. Loafers. I heard something about how samurai was not more than a title, an honorary post, something of the kind, but we can ignore those details. What is important is that despite those historical circumstances, the man was still a samurai. That he was still a warrior. The man fought in that peaceful age. In some ways more peaceful than this one, he still fought. Against what? If not with humans, only so many options remain. Against aberrations.
He fought against aberrations. Times differ props. Wait, so you're saying he was an expert? Mi Moshino, Deishu Kaiki, Yuzuru Kagenui, authorities on yokai and the like. No, maybe not. Somehow it didn't seem like they fought against aberrations. True, Kagenui felt pretty violent to me, but at the end of the day they were experts. They acted as mediators between two sides as negotiators. That was a better description of their station. Something about the word fighting felt wrong. In that case, wouldn't he be more like a vampire hunter? Dramaturgy, episode, guillotine cutter, that kind of person.
Well, I suppose, while I'm sure negotiators similar to that Hawaiian-shirted boy existed in those times as well, he was different from that type. The descendant of a storied line of those who made yokai extermination their calling, may be what he said. Or maybe not.
What, your memory's fuzzy about something that important?
I cannot help it. Memories are worn away by time.
Worn away? Listening to her speak, I was beginning to wonder, didn't memories ever get idealized in her case? My memories of the hell that was spring break and the nightmare that was Golden Week weren't pleasant. But when I actually tried to think back to those events, I found myself putting them in a fairly good light. It didn't feel like she was altering her memories as much as simply forgetting them. She was speaking like someone who was struggling to remember what she ate for dinner a week ago, like someone who was going back and recalling everything she ate to figure out what caused her food poisoning, for example. But this was 400 years ago, not a week. Maybe there wasn't anything left to see through any rose-tinted glasses. Still, this is an important episode about you and your first thrall, right? Even if your memories have gotten worn down, would they really get that vague? I mean, fill in whatever's missing with your imagination, sentimentally. You told me to get jealous, but nothing about your words just now would make anyone jealous.
Is that so? But now that you mention it, he was a fairly different type of man from thee, and different too was the situation. Perhaps a direct comparison is misguided. Also by now, if I may make something clear, and not out of any thoughtfulness for thee, the impression he left is not as strong as thine.
Really? But wasn't he your first?
Being my first thrall does not mean he must be more memorable than my second. While you may now be dating that tsundere girl and practically speak of her as thy first love, I'm sure that most strictly speaking thou had a crush on thy dry nurse and kindergarten or the like. But you've simply forgotten that. See?
Well, I understood. Her logic. But it did seem more suspect if you were to ask me if I thought my time in kindergarten matched up with Shinobu's experiences at 200. No, wait, was this really about impressions and not memories? In terms of romances, people always wanting to think that the love they're experiencing at the moment, first or not, is the best. The psychology of wanting to think so. It seemed clear the story Shinobu was sharing with me wasn't a pleasant one for her. But even then, something still bothered me. Did it matter so little? Shinobu's first thrall? Didn't you call him something like a man you could entrust your back to?
I did, but then I came to know thee. He feels a bit lacking in that regard looking back.
She was being way too candid. She still treasured his enchanted blade, carrying it with her in her belly, and yet... Also, doesn't your moniker Aberration Slayer originally come from what people called your first thrall's sword?
Aye, a sword passed down from generation to generation among a clan of yokai exterminators. A sword that had slain aberrations since time past, that must have been worshipped like a god in its own right. I call it an enchanted blade, but divine blade might accord better with reality.
Divine blade.
And the human who wielded it would have been like a god may have been a living god in his own right.
I can't help but feel like you're putting a veil over everything you're talking about. You keep on calling this guy he and him, but don't you think it's about time you told me the name of your first thrall? I can't picture his face if you don't.
Who knows?
Huh, that's a weird name. Hanos? But maybe it wasn't that weird back in those days. Wait, what?
Stop with thy surprise. Have I not told thee again and again? I recall the human world's proper nouns but vaguely, and call none by name. Listen when people speak to thee.
No, I was listening. And yes, she did say that. But I assumed there'd be exceptions, or rather, a limit. How could she not even remember the name of someone that important, the name of the main character? Just how in the moment did she live her life?
And I always called him Aberration Slayer as I am called now. He was easier to distinguish from other humans as he held that blade, and he had the unique air of an expert about him as well.
He was unique and special, so it made him easy to distinguish, which was paradoxically why you didn't need to call him by his name. I could understand the logic there, but it was too much of a stretch. It sounded like an excuse, or simply too cold by anyone's standards. Wasn't that just too cold-blooded? Where did her iron blood and hot blood go?
Look, ye've got it all wrong. Thou art an exception among exceptions for myself, as thou art the only one in my over 500 years to whom I owe my life. Compared to that, my relationship with the man who was my first thrall was casual. When I think back to him now, that is also why I thought I may be able to arouse thy jealousy, but it appears as though I could not perhaps jealousy for a man whose face thou cannot see, whose name thou dost not know, is a tall order.
You've been living a lot more casually than I thought. In fact, I was amazed she'd managed to survive for so long. Maybe it just proved how powerful of an aberration she was. Then, for convenience's sake, why don't we call him Aberration Slayer? The first Aberration Slayer would be too long.
'Tis the exact same length when you say it out loud.
Never mind. She wasn't wrong to point that out, but the first Aberration Slayer sounded too impersonal. Maybe it didn't reflect his personality. If Aberration Slayer was originally the name of a blade, it might be like calling me school uniform, but I wanted to do at least that much for my predecessor. Forget jealousy, I was starting to sympathize with him. You had to wonder. And then what? Did your slacker lifestyle change a bit when Aberration Slayer I came along?
Well, to some degree.
If he was an expert in yokai extermination, that has to mean he showed up to exterminate you, right? He heard rumors about you from somewhere, then appeared to attack you?
Nay, not in the slightest. We did battle once, but he hadn't come to exterminate me. Think upon it now. I was being venerated as a god in those rumors he heard, not scorned as some target he needed to exterminate.
Is that how it works? Even if there weren't any legends of vampires in Japan at the time, there must have been aberrations that sucked human blood. So it felt like an expert would be able to detect that Shinobu was a vampire and not any kind of god. Oh wait, I guess he found out in the end if you made him your thrall.
Indeed. So why don't I focus in on that bit? So, as I said, he came not to exterminate me, but to check things for himself. An entire lake had disappeared, and a god had manifested from it. 'Twas not a situation that one with his pedigree could ignore, though I do feel it took him some time to arrive. True, information did not travel as swiftly then as it does in this age. His transportation methods were limited as well. Now that I mention it, he arrived transported in a palanquin, with a long retinue tailing behind. 'Twas a regular daimyo procession. Not that I'd ever seen a genuine one, still all of those followers. He must have been as important as any feudal lord. I suppose thou could call them his thralls. He may have been connected in some way to those with effective control over the villages in the area. Perhaps he was even one of them himself. The villagers did kowtow terribly to him, but hierarchies within human communities are not something I am familiar with. What I am sure of, or rather what was important, was that he had come to my temporary abode. He posed no threat to me no matter how many humans came along with him. But something was different this one time. I did not feel threatened by him. Ye may think that odd, as he was an expert or a hunter, but I had been dealing with those types year-round. I could not even distinguish them from regular humans. Call me too casual, but what am I to do when that is who I am? There's no need for me to distinguish between hunters and regular humans. Anyway, the two are alike. Of course, the Hawaiian-shirted boy I met when I was weakened did leave a strong impression on me, as did Kaiki and Kadami after I became a little girl. 'Tis simply how it goes. Don't you think poorly of me? That said, it woke me up. I was awakened by their arrival, which is not to say I had been sleeping in the shrine until then. He aroused my awareness of things for the first time in a while. In others' words, as I was living my lukewarm existence as a god, I found a fine stimulus. But again, 'tis not to say that here that gathering was what excited me. Those blades, the ones he had hanging off of his hips, the ones he wore, would thou say? I'm unsure of the distinction there. In any case, the two blades the man had, as he left his palanquin, one large and one small, those are what drew me in. Though it may sound a bit vulgar that my attention was drawn to a man's hips, thou and I would then share a love of hips belonging to the opposite sex, so perhaps in that sense our connection is age-old. I jest. Two of them. Two blades, the longer being the enchanted blade, Kokoro-Watari. The one whose replica you've wielded, the true one, is rather more dangerous. Rather more dangerous, the longer man's. Two blades, the longer being the enchanted blade, Kokorothai. The one who's ever more dangerous. You've wielded. The true one is refer. Of course, 'twas not that effective of a weapon on me, but it did at least open my eyes. 'Twas enough of a stimulus? What about the smaller blade? The short sword? The second of the two blades? Have I never spoken of it? I thought I already had. Mayhap 'twas my imagination. Thou could say it was a backup, like something to keep the first two dangerous Kokoro-Watari in check. Perhaps we could call it a sheath. Well, both the original Kokoro-Watari and this short sword had their own separate sheaths, so the metaphor would only serve to complicate the story. A weapon that was too dangerous needed a follow-up. An accompaniment, my replica is but a replica, of course, so I've no need for the short sword. The second enchanted blade, the short sword, was known as Umawatari. Dost thou find it odd that I recall the name of the short sword, in addition to the one that I still use? Well, 'tis no special exception. That is simply how much of a set the short sword was with its leading blade, Kokoro-Watari. The two, the heart and the dream. Kokoro and Yume were one, and no sword could cut them apart, so to speak. If Kokoro-Watari is the aberration slayer, then Umawatari was the aberration savior. A divine blade that has been passed down through the generations becomes something like an aberration itself, so my own radar was pinging like mad. I left the shrine the moment I felt its presence, well, to be precise. I blew the shrine to dust, moving with such a bother that I chose to have the shrine disappear. I compared it to a daimyo procession, but I would say he had, 50 men with him. I believe he, its leader, was not the only expert, and that the other 49 were not mere underlings. Well, doing away with a shrine might not be enough of a miracle, but 'twas a sufficient display of power. Though if I truly made use of my power, it would be the earth I could make disappear, not the enfranchisement. I suppose the sun is the only thing I cannot disappear. My one and only goal, which I continue to hold to this day. Oh, don't say thou would never allow me to. 'Tis my one and only goal. But in any case, I succeeded in surprising them, even if 'twas not the point of making the shrine disappear. 'Twas just too much of a bother to walk outside. To me, it was not more than a structure I could rebuild. Yet that, and no more, managed to suppress them. For while they may have been experts in the field of yokai extermination, I was so far removed from any they'd known, the lot of them were gripped with terror. They collapsed on the spot. How disgraceful. I found myself losing my own will to fight, in fact. Only a few were able to continue standing in the face of my glaring countenance. I want to say about 5 of them. Aberration Slayer if ye want me to use that name as well. Only he, as well as the men directly under him, his 4 knights as it were, managed to stay on their feet and look in my direction. That probably is not to say they were unflustered, and 'twas not as though they recognized that I was not a god but a vampire. If anything, they believed me to be a true god. At least, one with enough power to be called such and venerated, and, as thou said, the color of my hair and skin were novel to the people of the land, so I must have appeared divine in the sun's reflection. Now, what do you think I did next? What did I do in the face of this continued misunderstanding? To be honest, I wavered for a moment, for as I said earlier, I sensed that they were hunters due to those swords. I could see a battle unfolding were I to reveal my true identity. Vacations are nice, but so is the occasional stimulus, so perhaps I should ratchet things up a bit. I would be lying if I claimed not to have felt that way. Nay, to jump ahead, I did not reveal my identity, nor was there any battle. I am a pacifist, as thou art aware. A pacifist, one who hates to fight. A humanist who believes in love above all. I make myself one to laugh, taking on the title of humanist when I am not even human. 'Tis a white lie so audacious I turn pale. My apologies, that was overdoing it. Even as far as jokes go, one thus. The reason we did not find ourselves in a battle next was simply that they did not seek one. As a bunch of men who made yokai extermination their job, I would be the exact type of creature they needed to kill. But in those days, as I just said, I was not yokai nor vampire, but a god. I was evidently on the level of a god, at least in terms of sheer power, so that was all for them. Though they did ask, as a formality, "Are you truly a god?" I still hesitated to call myself a god, though, so I answered, "Think of me as you wish, but do not call me by any name." I was able to give that much of a response by then, as I understood some bit of Japanese, and apparently my answer was persuasive. Of course, they did not attend to me like the vicinity's inhabitants. Their response was a realistic one in that sense. 'Twas not as though their attitude toward me suddenly changed either. If anything, they were quite businesslike. "A god, is that so? Then please sign these documents here and we will call thee later." That sort of thing. Figuratively, of course. I presume they had already dealt with many gods other than myself. 'Twas as if they felt at home once they knew me to be one. Even those who collapsed upon first impression stood right back up. Though I was not an actual god, well, familiarity can be a frightening thing. I suppose you could say familiarity was the main reason none of them feared a god, or that they even made light of gods, but I think the fact they were of the ruling class played a role as well. In other words, droughts did not particularly affect them. They would not have been saved by me, and not just they would not have been saved by any god. They had conceived of, created, and implemented systems that allowed them not to have to rely on gods. Such men do not venerate gods. If anything, they see gods as their equals. Believe and ye shall be saved, as we said. But it may in fact be closer to the truth to describe it as a manner of hindsight bias, whereby having been saved, one believes. But let us return to the subject. The rest of our conversation turned awkward, in part due to my unreliable Japanese, but we agreed to some promises I would adhere to as I played out my role as a god. Every land has its own rules. While we did not put them into writing, paper was quite valuable in those days. To summarize, they told me to not go too far. Having no reason to agree to such conditions, I considered routing them after all, but stopped myself. That enchanted blade was about the only thing I was interested in, and at the end of the day, even it was merely a blade. If it was being wielded by a human, I had nothing to fear. I assumed that if the time came to fight, we would fight. I decided to leave it up to fate. I did not have any clue then of just how wrong that decision was. I never imagined what would come from leaving everything in the hands of fate. None of it would have happened had I used their visit as my chance to leave my goodness. My goodness, what a wretched story.
So, this short sword, what was it like? It was probably a digression that took us away from what I wanted to learn then, but I still felt like I needed to ask. I needed to hear it. I felt like I'd come to really regret it if I didn't ask her, which isn't to say that some serious development involving it promised to come up soon. It was a more basic feeling that she'd forget its story, unless I put the question to her right there. While I discussed Kokoro-Watari with Shinobu a number of times, I hadn't even heard of the existence of this short sword. I'd never gotten even a whiff of it in the past. Actually, I was certain she'd forgotten about it until just now. Had I never spoken of it, my ass, get off your high horse? So if Kokoro-Watari slayed aberrations, did the short sword slay humans? Wait, that would just be a regular katana.
Indeed. As I said, 'tis the aberration savior. The short sword known as Ummotari is a blade that brings aberrations back to life. Though it does sound odd to describe aberrations as being brought back to life, as they were never alive to begin with. But in essence, 'tis a blade that can resurrect aberrations.
I don't get it.
A slice from that blade could bring an aberration slain by Kokoro-Watari back to life. In other words, 'tis an item with a healing property. Of course, the only wounds it heals, the only aberrations it revives, are those who suffered harm from Kokoro-Watari, giving it a rather limited capacity.
Another reason my dull replica does not require that short sword at all, added Shinobu.
And 'twould be heavy carrying around two blades.
Light or heavy shouldn't be an issue for you.
True, 'tis just how I feel. Also, I only slay.
She was right. If Ummotari's role was to place a limit on the sharpness of Kokoro-Watari, Shinobu didn't need it. She'd never try to return a slain aberration to life. All aberrations were nothing more than food to her. In that case, it almost feels like you'd be able to eat the sword itself.
I wonder. I doubt even I could have digested those two blades.
The way she replied to a joke with a serious-sounding response made me think she really did try and fail to eat them. 400 years ago, she'd definitely qualify as a glutton if she had. Well, forgetting about whether you could eat them, could you beat them? You said you did fight one battle with this aberration slayer, So who won and who lost then? My assumption was that you won, since you're still here and alive, but having heard about Ummotari's mysterious ability.
Ye dunce.
I got kicked by a little girl. She was the type to bark and bite at the same time. I of course had no objections to being kicked by a little girl's bare foot. Don't take that the wrong way. I only mean that I'm not that petty of a person. So instead of taking her to task for the attack, I simply said, "What's the matter? Can't I imagine a situation where you were killed with one slice and brought back to life with another?"
Nay, ye can't. How could I have forgotten Aberration Slayer I's name had he been so gifted that he could slay me? Have I not properly recalled the names of those 3 vampire hunters who stole my limbs from me in a true battle?
Oh, right. She remembered the names of strong people, in other words. What a combat geek. In that case, it was hard to tell if she remembered Ashino's name. While he did outwit her once, it wasn't as if they fought for real. Then again, he could have left a strong impression as an expert with a love of harassment and a terrible personality. And practically speaking, it felt like she only remembered the names of those 3 hunters because everything with them had taken place just half a year ago.
I shall say this for the sake of my honor in any case. By no means was I slain by Aberration Slayer I. Even what I call our battle was but a diversion.
A diversion?
A little entertainment over drinks. I merely toyed with him for a bit. I did want to test those blades.
Aye. 'Twas an item that could easily make history, Shinobu said, as if she was moved, and if she carried around a replica, her high opinion of it wasn't surprising.
But, well, the real one vanished. It disappeared, tails and all, so unfortunately 'tis no longer part of anyone's memories, let alone history.
Hearing you say all of this makes it sound like it was only the blades that were amazing. Like this Aberration Slayer I guy wasn't impressive at all.
Now, I would not go that far. If that was how my words sounded, it must have been the result of my consideration for thee. Were I to say it in a way that might wound as an expert in aberrations, he had 12 up on thee.
12 up? How high up was he? He might as well have infinite lives. But no, of course he did. I was an amateur, not any kind of expert. So yes, She had put it in a way that hurt. What a tough situation. I felt sympathetic when Shinobu was being too rude about her former partner, or rather, I started to get strangely indignant, but it's not like that stopped me from feeling bad when she spoke highly of him. It was tough. Shinobu said he was an ex-boyfriend of sorts, but now it felt like he was exactly that, not as an analogy.
Though he was limited in what he could do alone, strictly speaking, he was not more than a talented leader. He directed that group of 50 or so experts to slice any aberration in two with a single stroke. That was how he fought.
So of course he was unable to defeat me mano mano, Shinobu said.
Perhaps if all 50 of them came after me,
You might have lost?
indeed, I may have suffered a wound or two from their blades.
Just a wound or two, huh? As an aberration-slaying sword, a wound from Kokoro-Watari, or even a scratch, should have dealt significant, in fact fatal damage. But that didn't seem to matter much. In Shinobu's case, and I guess mine as well, the moment the blade cut us, which is to say the moment it killed us, we would come right back to life. That was another way in which Shinobu had no use for Umiwatari. Even though it might have only been a replica, that thing made me suffer through the nightmare that was dying, then being brought back to life. Life, then dying again, then being brought back to life again. You could call it the drawback of my healing abilities.
In any case, I was able to handle those visiting experts, that lot of hunters, well enough.
It seemed hard to imagine, given the haphazard, or even self-indulgent, slacker-like life she led, but then she was handling the locals well enough now too. Though I wouldn't say she got along with them, though their relationship wasn't what you'd call friendly.
They would come by regularly after that to speak with me, then leave. They did this again and again. As for their frequency, I suppose 'twas about once a month, perhaps a little more often. I helped them with their yokai exterminations a few times as well. That was when I entrusted my back to him. While 'twas difficult work dealing with yokai that were unique to Japan, aberrations are not more than energy to me at the end of the day. They were little more than novelties to me. Of course, I was not able to consume any of that energy as I could not possibly eat while they were watching.
I had no choice but to watch in silence as my delicious-looking prey was tossed out. Shinobu lamented with true regret in her voice. She looked so regretful. Despite her worn-away memories, the aberrations she couldn't eat still seemed fresh in her mind. I couldn't believe it. She lived according to hunger alone. Hey, Shinobu. In that case, why didn't you just become a god? I thought you might not be cut out for it at first. But now that I've heard more, the job actually sounds like a good fit. Or like you were perfect for it. Really. You didn't oppress the people, and if there were any issues at all, I guess it would just be your vampiric impulses.
Yea, fool. Those vampiric impulses that ye call an issue are problem enough. Though I could simply have traveled afar if I was unable to suck the blood of those humans who took kindly to me, I was but a traveler. My vacation was not more than that, a vacation.
Talk about obstinate. Of course that might have been how I looked while I was trying to turn from a vampire back into a human, not that I'd been able to at all. When I thought about it, my immortality had saved me more than a few times too. Even if everything could be solved and I could suddenly return to being a regular human, I doubt I'd be able to say yes and go back on the spot. I've relied too much on my vampiric nature for too long. Didn't Shinobu feel the same kind of hesitation back then? Not that it mattered either way now. Now I'm not.
Well, in fact,
Her expression suddenly serious.
that was not the only problem. That was not the only problem. It was not my vampiric impulses alone. For that could be solved without issue if it truly mattered violent a solution as it may have been.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. This was 400 years ago anyway. You could have always taken a trip out of town, or if you really had to, you could have demanded a sacrifice. Actually, you could have eaten some aberrations when Aberration Slayer I and his guys weren't looking. 1 year. She said she lived as a god for about a year, which would mean she pretty much fasted for a whole year. She might have enjoyed the food given to her as offerings, but they wouldn't have been nourishing. They'd be like the Mr. Donuts she ate now. I was impressed by her self-control, but maybe that just showed how utterly powerful she was at the time. Or maybe she'd been feeling that starved for witness testimonies. I could only guess, given how vague Shinobu's story was. In any case, your vampiric impulses wouldn't have posed a direct threat. So, was there something else? Another, issue?
And 'tis one that you ought to know, and know quite well. Well, if I hold out like that, thou might feel disappointed again, so I shall go ahead and dispense a spoiler here. The issue was not my vampiric impulses or the like, but my very presence as an aberration as a vampire. thou must remember. The shrine we traveled to for that forelocked girl that we used yesterday to travel through time. The shrine that has been the scene of multiple cases. Kitashira Heibi Shrine. Why negative energy gathered in that place? Thou must remember the cause quite well, eh? After all, ye were the one to accept the Hawaiian shirted boy's mission to seal away that negative energy. Thou completed that all-important task. Indeed. The aberration that I am, I, the king of aberrations, or rather my past self, the presence known as Kissshot, a Cerulorian heart underblade gathers aberrations, like a bug zapper of sorts. There could be no more convenient a trait when ye think of it. It left me free to eat as many gathered aberrations as I wished. My prey came to me to be eaten, though strictly speaking, I simply destroyed the balance, the ecosystem of aberrations. They knew not that they were coming to be devoured. And what gathered was not so much the aberrations themselves as the negative energy that precedes them. Aye, those bad things. Indeed, that Hawaiian shirted boy described them as such. Bad things. Does that ring a bell? Well, think of how ye describe this darkness as being incomprehensible. Does that not feel similar somehow? 'Tis ironic, in fact. I'd been careless. T'id forgotten the very reason I roamed, traveling from one place to the next. No, that was one thing I'd not forgotten. I'd been careless, and I'd been thoughtless, but I was not such a fool that I'd forgotten the reason I traveled. I ought not stay for long in one place. I utterly destroy the balance of its aberrational ecosystem. 'Tis a troubling trait. It makes one question being too strong, but a bit of an upset balance does not allow that negative energy to form into true aberrations. The only harm that would come to a place is a darkening of its general mood. But it could certainly lead to a great yokai war. What that Hawaiian shirted boy told thee was no exaggeration. Even then, that would not be a problem on its own. In reality, I would have been able to handle the situation had it arisen. Were I at my zenith, I could have dealt with this town's hangout with ease, no matter how it grew. It only became a problem because I lost my powers after attracting it here, and because that Hawaiian shirted boy had me under observation. As a bug zapper, I was at least able to handle whatever I attracted. That said, I'd be no match for them if I allowed so many to gather that they were out of control, and so I moved as appropriate. Dost thou understand now? Why I could not stay forever as a god? 'Twould become a crucible of aberrations had I continued to be there. Heaven to me, 'twould be hell to anyone else. Hedonist though I may be, I am no decadent. 'Tis not my desire. And so I thought perhaps I should cease this vacationer's life at an appropriate time. But I had been careless here because I'd previously been at the South Pole, a land where neither humans nor aberrations exist. It had caused my senses to go awry. I had not noticed one bit that despite my presence in that village, those bad things were not gathering at all. 'Twas hard to notice as local yokai appeared from time to time. Even I would have surely felt that something was off had not a one appeared. They're taking awfully long to gather this time, so perhaps I could stay here for a little longer. I suppose I can let them treat me as a god. The food is good, and I can sleep as much as I wish. Oh, what joy. That is how I felt. Oh, do not call it self-indulgence. 'Twas not as if I traveled because I wanted to. So of course I'd want to sit down and rest from time to time, their treatment of me as a god aside. So I made an exception and put off leaving again and again, staying there for one long year. 'Tis still okay. 'Tis still okay. 'Tis still okay, I thought. But each seemingly peaceful day that passed was another lost opportunity to avert a tragedy. It all happened, nay, 'twas noticed to be happening not by me or that group of experts, not by Aberration Slayer I, but by the residents of the area. Aye, that bunch living around me. You see, aberrations spread by word of mouth. By the time they imbue the common populace and make it to the top, 'tis already too late. There is not a thing that can be done then. Though this was not an aberration, of course. This was their story. People are disappearing, they said. People are going away, they said. People are vanishing, they said. They leave and never come back, they said. That on its own sounds like a case of humans being spirited away. But 'twas hard to explain it all as such, for I was there, a god living in a readily found location, which was an ironclad alibi after a fashion. If they thought it a case of me spiriting away, men and women, they would only have to come to my shrine and search it from corner to corner to find them, though none did so in reality. I suppose my daily good behavior was enough to convince them, laugh not. I truly did act in a benevolent way then. though 'tis awfully ironic that 'twas my acting like a god that cleared any suspicions that I had spirited anyone away like some god. But it seemed this truly was occurring when I looked into it a bit myself. At the very least, it was no simple case of runaways, kidnappings, or murders. 'Twas a linked series of aberrational phenomena. Nay, as I said, 'twould be hard to call it such. I did think, so 'tis here at last, that staying in a place for so long had caused a chain reaction of negative energy, but something still felt off. Namely, there was a lack of eyewitness testimonies. 'Twas as if I was only learning of the results of a phenomenon, not about the phenomena itself, not one who either witnessed or experienced the spiriting away came forth. Humans were simply disappearing. That was all. These kinds of phenomena, which is to say these kinds of ghost stories, normally involve someone alongside the human who disappeared, who sees it all happen. Such people should have existed. Or if not, someone who had disappeared needed to return, even if their memories were not intact. There were none. They disappear, they go away, they vanish, and they don't come back. If they had someone accompanying them, that person did not return either. That was all 'twas self-contained. So much so that there was nothing we could do about it. I tried speaking to Aberration Slayer I, and we investigated it together, but ultimately we never found any evidence. Our conclusion was that perhaps these were crimes committed by a human. For while there may be no such thing as a perfect crime for aberrations, perfect crimes by humans do exist. This was not our job. That was the conclusion we came to, that 'twas not a job for either a god or an expert. 'Twas a job for the police. Well, in those days the job of the temple schools, nay, what was it again? The Doshin, or something like their kind. In any case, it fell upon another type of expert while I would make it rain as a god. I was not getting involved in any opaque strife amongst humans, though this was a dreadful shirking of responsibility in hindsight. I ought to have wondered why that aura of negative energy had yet to arrive this one time alone. I ought to have wondered about how just in the way the humans disappeared, so had the negative aura. I ought to have wondered about that. But in reality, I nearly failed to notice the mere fact they had never come. Why would I be bothered by them not arriving? Meanwhile, I would have no choice but to notice, had a mass of them come creeping and crawling, and I surely would have considered their cause. But humans and vampires, for that matter, cannot take seriously those dangers that are not pressing. I regret it, but I doubt my lesson will ever be of use. In brief, I did nothing. I lived as I had. And as I did, they disappeared. The residents of the lands around me continued to go missing. Until no one was left, it kept continuing.
My first thought was that I misheard her, or that she misspoke until no one was left. Not one? What's that supposed to mean? Until no one was left? So, until all 50 of Aberration Slayer I's group of experts was gone?
Why would that be the case? I suggested nothing of the sort. You need to learn to piece together the logical progression of a story.
Your stories don't have a logical progression to them. Your memories are so worn away that the details are completely fuzzy. I don't know if I should say this, but you're even worse at telling stories than me. She wasn't a poor talker. She was a poor storyteller. I was truly relieved that, per Hachikuji, there was a rule saying that aberrations couldn't be the narrator.
You've got some nerve. But apparently that monkey girl is being called the best storyteller up until now, which is unexpected. Looks like you've been overshadowed.
No, I think people only said good things about Comber because her narration wasn't nearly the mess they thought it'd be. In other words, couldn't you say she let them down? And hold on, can you stop talking about future events like it's nothing? We needed to hurry up and get rid of the rule saying that aberrations are allowed to give meta-commentary. Of course, you could also say it's beyond too late for that. There's only one book left, after all.
By the way, I understand the last book will be narrated by that tsundere girl.
What, really? Not me?
That was kind of a shock. Did that mean I was done after this? That easily? That unceremoniously? They wouldn't really do that, would they?
I simply can't wait to hear how that tsundere girl truly feels. I wonder what kind of verbal abuse we'll get from her.
Verbal abuse? Like, about me? No, she doesn't badmouth me. She's reformed now. She's become a clean-hearted Hidegi Senjou Dehara.
No. We have no idea how a woman truly feels. In my estimation, that woman is surely thinking about how to break up with thee.
Why are you acting like you're so knowledgeable about human psychology? You were just talking about how you got into a huge mess because you didn't understand it.
She's holding back out of sympathy, as 'twould surely affect thy entrance exams if she discussed breaking up with thee right now.
You do hear that one a lot. Yikes. Hearing that really makes me think she might be reformed and a lot more expressive now, but I still can't quite tell what she's thinking. Even at that moment, I couldn't begin to imagine what she might be doing. Though the most likely option did seem to be that she was thinking about how to criticize me for skipping the start of school ceremony. Enough about next volume. We don't even know if there's going to be a next volume at this rate, and it almost seems like this flashback of yours could take up the entire story this time. She needed to realize that everyone's getting worried. Worried about this surprisingly long story about her past.
What's the matter? Flashbacks are the cornerstone of any popular manga.
As a reader, I'd be more inclined to call them a bad practice than a cornerstone. One a day, Ido chur sevens.
Flashbacks are a part of this, but wouldn't thou say that the more popular a manga, the slower the progression of its story?
Do we really have to talk about this now? Aren't we at an important part of your own story? Even the most important part.
A deliberate pace might be vexing to readers, but it must be vexing to the creator as well. 'Tis not blood flow restriction training. Writing that slowly must make even the creator lose the thread.
Well, if I step back from looking at it as a reader and looked at it as a fan, what's really going on is that the title's getting dragged out at the publisher's request.
But I don't think a publisher would ask a creator to go slowly.
Sure, they probably don't want them to go slowly, they'd want them to speed ahead if possible, but one person only has so much talent. The only way you can stretch a title out is by watering it down to some degree.
I see. While I understand thy logic, would an author so popular that the publisher asks for his work to be stretched out need to listen to what the publisher says? Could he not simply put an end to a story he wishes to finish?
Part of a publisher's job is to control its authors, so they probably get talked into stretching the title out without even realizing they're being controlled.
So at the end of the day, even creators are in the palm of capital's hands.
On whose behalf are you getting mad here? It wasn't the position of a reader or fan, and given Shinobu's lifespan, it shouldn't matter how long any popular manga gets stretched out. Not that I know Shinobu's exact lifespan as she is now. I had to admit though, those are a rare sight these days. Final chapters of popular manga series. So, Shinobu, now that we've reached a conclusion on that topic, can we get back to our main plot?
I've yet to be convinced, but very well.
I'm going to send you flying if this story ends up having nothing to do with the darkness, you know. I'm gonna grope your breasts until they double in size.
To me, a chest groping is nothing more than proof of loyalty from a slave.
Oh, right. I guess some such thing was established at some point. Her initial character traits had grown pretty vague, but it seemed like that one was still alive and well. Okay then. If your story ends up having nothing to do with the darkness, I'm gonna grope Hachikuji's breasts until they double in size.
Very well. I've already told thee this much, so I'm willing to take that risk.
We just made an unthinkable deal that ignored the human rights of a girl who was still passed out right beside us. So, no one was left? What do you mean by that? You can tell me to attend to the logical progression as much as you want, but the way you talk and your delivery makes it sound like every person who lived around you disappeared.
That's correct. So thou dost understand? I see that my abilities as a storyteller are superb after all. In fact, I think we may change plans for the next volume and, in a twist, make its narrator none other than me.
That's too much of a twist and disrespectful to Senjo Gahara. And wait, everyone disappeared? And then there were none. This isn't an Agatha Christie novel we're talking about here.
But that told the events on an uninhabited island. This was far worse, as an entire village turned uninhabited.
The scale was so big, too big. It was hard to comprehend when she put it in roundabout ways, like the village disappearing or the town vanishing, but how many people disappeared exactly? 50 was just the start of it. I shouldn't be sure since I didn't know the population at that time, or the area's population density, but it felt like it'd have to be more than a couple hundred people. They'd been spirited away on that big of a scale? Hold on a sec. So unlike the time you made the lake disappear, these people disappeared not all at once but gradually, right? Little by little, they vanished. So you should have been able to notice before it got that bad. What in the world were you doing before you realized? Then there were none. Sleeping?
If you wish to put it that way, then I was sleeping.
Shinobu responded to my line of questioning, tinged with criticism, without a shred of discomfort, but, while she didn't seem uncomfortable, there was a bit of awkwardness in her words.
I lazed around the entire time, but really, isn't it all the same? Had they all disappeared at once, there would have been nothing I could do about it. In any case, the community was doomed from the moment I made no active effort to prevent that from happening.
Well, true. Logically speaking, there was no difference between them disappearing all at once or disappearing gradually if they all disappeared by the end. But I didn't want to speak logically here.
Thou must have had the experience of feeling as though ye had a great deal of money, then using it gradually until suddenly thy wallet is empty. 'Tis the same.
I don't know about that comparison either. At the same time, I guess it was actually harder to realize what was happening if they got thinned out over time instead of disappearing all at once. It might have been hard to recognize the gravity of the case. You did fail to notice what was happening during your initial investigation. After all, had hundreds of villagers suddenly gone missing, even Shinobu and Aberration Slayer, I would have done something. But it might take longer to respond if it was at a pace of one person each night, or 5 people every 3 days. And to notice too. The gravity of the matter. So how did you end up noticing in the end? You know that this abnormal situation was going on.
Which one dost thou mean? That no negativity came flowing in despite my sojourn there, or the steady disappearance of villagers until no one was left in the end?
Both, but I guess I meant the latter.
I suppose I noticed the latter. Then noticed the former moments later. I would have had to notice the latter sooner or later, regardless of how thick-headed I was. Those believers who venerated me stopped coming to pay their respects entirely.
Ah, right.
Though I thought at first that they had at last exhausted whatever patience they had for my cold demeanor, I had dismissed them, saying that their being spirited away was none of my concern, and that neither I nor any yokai creature had anything to do with it. I'd left them to figure it out and take care of it on their own. So I thought they had gotten fed up and discarded their belief in such an unreliable god, resulting in a drop in visitors paying their respects. But it was undeniably odd for their number to reach 0. No matter how rampantly they were being spirited away, those humans still had to eat to survive. In that case, they wouldn't have stopped praying to me, for rain drought was naturally a far more immediate problem for those who hadn't been spirited away. They wouldn't have forsaken me and brought another famine upon themselves. And so I noticed.
'Twas the logical conclusion, she said. For some reason, I got annoyed just hearing the word logic come out of her mouth.
Something was strange. And so I left my shrine and descended to the village, though strictly speaking, I was on the floor of what was once a lake, so it was more like ascending, and what I found was a scene resembling the Mary Celeste.
Of course, that comparison wouldn't make chronological sense. A deserted village. A community with no one in it. The villages Shinobu ruled over as a god had turned into ghost towns. Every man, woman, and child who followed her had disappeared. They disappeared gradually, while she hadn't noticed. How did that make you feel? Okay, it might be cruel to ask for your impressions of the sight, but I'm interested to know what you felt back then, when you were at your zenith and uninfluenced by me. The humans who venerated her had disappeared, unseen by her but within reach. When something she couldn't undo happened, how did Kissat Asarolari and Heartunderblade take it in? I wanted to know.
Nothing special. I was surprised, like, whoa, they're not there.
She hadn't taken anything in, she just passed on the ball. Or just passed on it.
Could they have all left, I thought, perhaps to find work? Then from there I may have been outraged that they'd leave me and sneak off on their own and vowed to kill them all.
You're the worst. She was just short-tempered, but maybe that's how it was. There was probably no point in blaming her, it was a different era then. I was the fool for asking the question in the first place, since Shinobu simply wasn't what she is now. It would be different now, right? You wouldn't react that way if it happened today.
Indeed. Now my reaction would most likely be, ah! They're gone indeed.
So, it would just be louder? She was posing too, if you're curious. Give me a break, was the only thing she learned during her time with me, how to react in a stupid way. She needed to learn some emotions, what it means to have a human heart.
I'd find it hard to learn such things from thee, but after that I traveled around all the neighboring villages.
Uh-huh.
I emotionally traveled around with heart.
You don't need to add any pointless descriptors, just tell me the facts.
Then what I understood from this investigation was that no one remained in any of the nearby communities, though all the villages beyond a certain point were fine, as though a boundary had been drawn.
A boundary, so. In other words, the line separating the people who believed in you from the ones who didn't? Geographically speaking.
Indeed. To be more precise, I would say 'twas whether they knew of me or not. Faith had nothing to do with it, for there were those in the neighboring villages who had none in me despite knowing of my existence. They were a minority. I thought that perhaps they may have still remained, but such hopes turned out to be false.
In that case? In that case, I said, but didn't know what came next. It was like I felt bewildered, or that I was grasping at straws. Despite all I'd heard from her, I couldn't grasp the essence of what she was saying. Regardless of her abilities as a storyteller, though, Shinobu was the narrator, the protagonist here, so for me, a thread still ran through it, otherwise it would have been too meandering, as a tale about aberrations. Not a tale about aberrations, but a ghost story. Of bad things, of the unclear and the incomprehensible. Just like the darkness.
In that case,
Shinobu continued where I left off, though I doubted it was because she'd read how confused I felt. No, perhaps she had. Our hearts and minds were connected, after all.
even I understood that something was going on.
That's where you were at, despite all that happened already. Just how happy-go-lucky are you?
I wish that would describe that as my being a big shot, but it did seem that something was happening, and I also realized that I seemed to be the cause.
Wait, the cause? I don't know if that's exactly right. Even if you realized that you had something to do with the phenomenon, that should have been as much as you could have said at that point.
Nay, it was my experience speaking. When something happens, in most cases, 'tis because of me.
Yeah, it was, I guessed. Not that I could complain when I'd been getting Shinobu to help me solve these things that did happen and to take care of the aftermath.
And I noticed it last now that I thought about it. I had stayed there for a rather long time and yet no negative energy had accumulated at all. I noticed that none had come. So if anything had caused this situation, it was that I had lived there for too long, causing that energy to do something somewhere, or so I thought. But that didn't seem to be the case when I looked around.
And the fact that it didn't was odd. 'Twas abnormal. An abnormal situation, Shinobu muttered, closing her eyes.
'Twas odd that nothing supernatural had occurred, and odd that an abnormal situation obtained despite this. I suppose thou could say it didn't line up. I could not ignore how uneven it felt. To be honest, the fact that all of the neighboring villagers had disappeared was not as strange as the comparable fact that nothing was gathered nearby. That's what made me feel unwell. Since I felt unwell, I returned home and slept.
Hey!
Is it not best to retire and rest when you feel unwell?
It is, but still. So when there was something that she didn't understand, going home and sleeping made her feel better? What a handy constitution she had?
Now that everyone was gone, I thought of going off somewhere, not with a super jump this time, but by spreading my wings and gliding right off, as if I'd Doraemon's bamboo copter on my head.
Again, those didn't exist back then. Not that they existed now. I wonder when they'll be invented.
I need not worry about the battery running out, though. Didst thou know that bamboo copters require a break every 4 hours if they're to be used over an extended period?
I know facts that you can find in a manga in my little sister's room. Okay, wait, what? Don't tell me you really flew off to another country after that. That you really went to sleep, woke up, and forgot it all.
But of course not. Yeah, you shouldn't underestimate me so.
I don't know. I feel like you do everything at such a big scale that it always deserves respect. That's why I wanted to be sure.
Though thou art correct to say that I went to sleep, woke up and forgot it all.
Big.
Downright unfathomable. Seriously.
I jest. Even I am not so simple that I can forget everything after sleeping and waking. I awoke and still remembered. Like, oops, no good. It's turned from a short-term memory into a long-term one.
Well, yeah. I find the carefree attitude ever so annoying, but I suppose humans, or I guess brains aren't built so simply.
And so I plunged my hand into my head, scrambled and destroyed my brain cells, and forced myself to forget about everything that happened in recent times.
You can mess with your brain like that not just to remember things, but to forget them too? Now that was scary. No matter how much her body might be able to recover, the idea of picking and choosing her memories like that was almost unthinkable. Even Hanekawa, who knew everything, would be surprised to hear that. She wouldn't be able to accept it.